You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 490, our coverage of The Mines of Mandalore, the chapter, what are we on, 19 of season 3 of The Mandalorian, and 18, as I'm being told from the side. Hold on, this is just in, yes, chapter 18, 19, somewhere around there. Whatever it is, it was a great episode, and I really enjoyed it, and I got some questions about why the decision to kind of break the first two episodes up, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit here. And I've got a lot of other questions because at the end of this, I'm like scratching my head like, okay, now where are we going? Because we didn't get a whole lot to kind of build off of, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I see that as a good thing. And speaking of good things that I see,
nice.
Jonesy's with us. How about that transition? Jonesy's with us tonight. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well. Thank you for having me tonight. It's a special honor to be here with you.
Well, it is. I'm glad you can make it.
Always been a dream of mine. You're right. Though. This episode left us in a place where, okay, wow, let's just rip the Band-Aid off the season, right? We kind of thought maybe this would happen, and it did. Although I was a little surprised we ripped the Band-Aid off the very end of this episode so early. I thought that would have been more of a climax type of thing. But again, a lot more to go for the season. But wow, I mean, way to come off of episode 1, where the chapter 17 maybe felt like it was setting a lot of pieces back in place. Maybe not, I don't know, a little mixed reaction in some cases. Some people liked it, but man, you just jumped both feet in of sorts, so to speak, for this episode.
And sink to the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right?
Right.
You are wearing Beskar. You are going straight down.
It was the analogy was not lost on me. So before we get into all of that, do we have any news? I don't even. What's going on in Star Wars?
We have one piece
world?
of Cantina Cast news, actually. So we did post a new Jeditorial out there from very own Stephanie talking about the path to the dark side. So cantinacast.com, or directly you can go cantinacast.com/Jeditorials and go check out her article, which is talking all about basically attachment. And so it's a really interesting article, has some psychology stuff in there too. So I think you might like that one, especially if you're a fan of Anakin Skywalker, and a couple other examples across the Star Wars galaxy. So cantinacast.com/Jeditorials for Stephanie's article.
Very cool. She is with us tonight. She was also very recently on an episode of From a Certain Point of View, where we talked about our top 3 moments of, or was it our ships? As actually we did for Valentine's Day. We did the top 3 ships. That was a lot of fun. So
that's right. Yeah. And she's in the chat there with Lauren, of course, as always, our other partner in crime on the show. And they do their one hell of a fan pick. They actually just did another episode there too. So if you want to go check that one out, that's another good episode if you are into the fan fiction side of things.
Yeah. I feel sick, called out, but yeah, I am.
Yeah.
What else we got going on? I mean, there's stuff going on. I mean, but like we've got Celebration coming up here shortly. There's all kinds of stuff coming out, and I see it happen. I just haven't had a chance to dive in, and I don't know if tonight's the best episode.
We'll kind of get in probably just get straight into the show here in a couple minutes, but. When we come back on Thursday, we'll do the Bad Batch. I'll do a proper news. I've been traveling for work this week, so it's a little out of sync here. But all of the guests have been confirmed for Celebration. I think the panels are starting to get a lot more structure and all of that as well. So I'll try to piece some of that together, at least what we know so far, the things that might be interesting to people as they go out there and get ready for it, or if you're staying at home like us, what to expect. And again, as we get a little bit closer to Celebration, we'll do our best to try to squeeze in a Celebration-centric episode. At the very least, we'll come back around at the very end and recap everything and all the excitement that came from there and see if we can get some firsthand information from folks that were actually able to visit London this year. So anyway, so more to come there, but it sounds like all the guests are out there. StarWars.com is your best place to go get all the information. And they continue to post stuff almost every day, every other day about what's going on. So, keep going over the official site. They'll have everything you need to know.
Yeah. And Jeff brought it up, and we'll talk about this on Thursday, but the Certain Point of View, so the novelization, the short stories was announced, and the cover looks awesome. I mean, it looks very similar to the other ones, only it's got like a little Ewok on there. I think it's Wicked, to be honest. But so yeah, pretty excited about getting into that, and just a couple of other little things that have been popping up here and there, but we're on the cusp of a plethora of news that is going to hit us like a tsunami very shortly. So it's going to be a lot
of course, over on cantinacast.com/YouTube, if you're watching the live stream, that's where you're at right now. Lauren posted her official review of Battle Scars, the new Jedi Fallen Order prequel to the sequel video game. There we go. I think I said that right.
Yep.
So you'll want to go out there and check out her full length review. She has a spoiler free review as well. If you still haven't read it and you're wanting, she's getting lots of great comments and feedback over on the YouTube site as well on her video. So welcome you to check that out as well. And of course, if you need to get caught up on anything that we've got going on with the Bad Batch or our final hype episode for Mando or from the first episode from the season for Mando, it's all out there. You can go get caught up and listen to it all before you listen to this one.
Yeah.
And then,
and also,
go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, so I was talking to Lauren about, there were some folks asking for her to review the video game. And that is not something we typically have done in the past, right? We've never really kind of gone and done Star Wars video game reviews, but I think it would be good for Lauren to kind of pick that up. So push her to do this, because I think she wants to do it, but I think she's looking for people to say, oh, please, Lauren, do it, because I think it makes sense, honestly, because of the book and just not going from a gaming perspective, right? Not getting into the technical details of the video game or the technical aspects, but strictly around the storyline. I think that would be super intriguing to see her breakdown and analysis of that, giving what she's already done with Battlescar. So give her a slight push, put your comments in there. Like, Lauren, you can do it. Please do it. And I'm sure she'll come around to the idea.
Now, if I were you, Lauren, I'd probably wait until someone posted all the cinematics or the video presentations, as she liked to call them. So, yeah, that's what I would do. That's not the Cliff Notes, Jones, either.
Yeah, sure it's not.
But you know who's not a Cliff Note, Albert?
Oh, my goodness.
That's our Patreon subscribers. A huge thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers. If you're interested in checking that out, cantinacast.com/Patreon. Everything you guys donate to the show gets put right back in, cover bills, other opportunities that we have later on. And a special thank you to our now part of the tribe members, Mike, Rob, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin Jackson, Truckman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, and Uncle Leon. And then our Delusions of Grandeur members, Rod and Kathy. Thank you all so much. We certainly appreciate all of your patronage, as they might call it.
As you may. Yeah, it's a good word. Okay, well, enough of the jibba jabba, as a wise man once said. Let's get into our breakdown here of
Pelimato. All right, here we go.
Oh man,
yes.
Please no. We're going to talk Pelimato. We have to. I mean, you can't. They shoehorned her into this episode. Let's just say that. But
they kicked off the episode with her.
Yeah, what a way to start, huh? Toothless motto. But let's tell me your thoughts. Kind of give me your
continuity.
Sure. Either way, it does nothing for her likability in terms of my likability. So, give me your opening thoughts on this episode. Kind of, what were you thinking overall, having seen it, and what stood out for you?
Wow, in a word, man, cinematic. I think the way that Rachel Morrison, the director, used lighting and the mines and man, just the way that the scenes were framed and everything was just absolutely stellar and stunning. I mean, it floored me like how good this episode looked. And we expect really high quality, viewing, right? And the framing and the way that these are shot, they should be fantastic, and they have been. But man, this one just felt like on another level and maybe it was just because of the use of lighting and the use of shadow, and it just really stood out to me for some reason, this episode, and I really, really enjoyed it. But overall, I mean, yeah, getting all of the background, I think in Discord, it may have been Risk or somebody else. Forgive me if I got the name wrong of who said this, but it really felt like you were getting a Clone Wars history lesson from Bo-Katan, which was really kind of cool. It really, I think if I'm a viewer who didn't necessarily watch those shows or familiar with Rebels, you really did get a sense, at least a little flavor of the history and all of the things that we have seen on screen and that we've had referred to as before. And to have all that summarized for us. And again, to see a little bit of her perspective, the princess angle of things, if you will.
Yeah.
To where what it meant for her and her family. And also a little bit of maybe how she discounts the way, right, of some ways, or these tenets that she would recite, but maybe didn't really mean anything to her and still don't. But maybe starting to turn a corner at the end of this episode about maybe how she might feel about all that. And it'll be fun to speculate what might be coming next for Bo-Katan. And and kind of that change of how we view her. And so it was really cool. I liked seeing her come to to Din's rescue, and being able to see her really not even think twice about it. While he was a thorn in her side, all of a sudden she was like, no, this is the right thing to do. Let's go rescue him. He's not a bad guy. He's just kind of a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
But it was really cool to see all of that. But I mean, there's a lot of things in this episode that were really, really great. But I'll stop there as just kind of an overall first stab at it. But what about you? What stood out for you this episode?
Well, let me touch on the first thing you mentioned, just to kind of add to that. So Rachel Morrison was the director for this episode, and we had talked about not having seen much of anything. At least I hadn't seen much of anything, and I thought she did an outstanding job on this episode. To your point, it did feel very cinematic. There were moments in there where I think people could complain about the darkness of it all, but I think there was something very symbolic in terms of what that looked like, right? The darkness of going down into Mandalore after, Night of 1,000 Tears and the Purge, and all of it just played really well. I thought the use of the shadows actually worked really well, even though it was darker to see. And I know I had that complaint with one of the more recent episodes of the Bad Batch, but for me, this worked. Visually it worked given where they were and all of that. So although it was difficult to see at times still with this one, I think it worked better because of the theme and thematically what was going on in the episode and kind of what's going on Mandalore. So hats off to her for an outstanding job in directing this. The story was Jon Favreau again, so continues on as the primary writer. I enjoyed the story a lot. It reminded me of in the spirit of a lot of the episodes that we got from season 1 and season 2, where it was just kind of like big world building, fantasy building, playing with the action figures kind of thing, and really red meat for a lot of Star Wars fans and a lot of Mandalorian fans. And I want to get into that here a little bit later. We'll dive into that or dig into that just a little bit more. When I said that it was really rich in Mandalore, and I mean that literally here. I enjoyed that this was also kind of like a test of faith for not only Din, but for Bo-Katan, right? They were both challenged in their faiths in this episode. And I think that bodes well because I think we've been talking about at some point, theorizing that at some point maybe these groups do come together again, right? There is some kind of unification that's going to occur with Mandalore. And to do that, you're going to have things that have to happen to these characters for them to get past a lot of their beliefs and a lot of what they don't believe in. And I think this episode did a lot to kind of break down some initial walls. I don't want to jump too far because I think there's still a lot more to go. But I think it did a good job of breaking down some of the walls for both Bo-Katan and Din Djarin in that regard. So that bodes well for them kind of coming together. We'll get into the shipping of them later too, because that's a whole other thing that I had. I thought it did a good job of filling in the blanks. Filling in the blanks of what had happened. Like to your point, it was a lesson in the Clone Wars. It was a lesson in Star Wars Rebels. I think they did just enough to kind of give you what you needed. But for us that have seen all of that, I mean, it was just like, not only was it this is your life moment because it was easy for us to kind of recall on all of that stuff, but then you just realize just how steeped in lore this actually is, even though for most people that hadn't seen that stuff, it's all kind of on the surface. It's just enough for them to kind of get something to work off of, but there's really a lot more to that. So for anybody that's interested in going back and exploring that, I mean, you've got episodes upon episodes to get into the history of Mandalore and to really kind of see where these characters are coming from. Although I don't think we'll do that in this series. It's there and it's available if you want to. So a lot more opportunity there. On the technical side of things, I'm still kind of like, the music, like I was expecting, remember I said when we get to Mandalore, like that's what I thought was going to have like a main theme. Like there was going to be some iconic Mandalorian music or overall theme that would, they'd build on from episodes here on after. And maybe it's still to come, but didn't happen in this episode, which I thought was kind of like, otherwise it was kind of the same music. So it wasn't really necessarily a bad thing. No harm done in terms of the music, but still hasn't done anything for me this season in terms of really gripping me yet.
See, I really like that it was subtle though, this episode. It really lets you take visually what was going on. And I actually, the more I think about it, I'm like, man, did I even recognize the music?
Well,
it was so subtle. I didn't even recognize it. It was very subtle. Yeah. And I kind of think that might be a good thing. I mean, you just visually take everything in and just absorb everything that's going around, because there's a lot of things to look around and look for. And to go back to what you were saying about it was very dark. I think the only, maybe if you call it a complaint, I think it's not a complaint, it's just the state of Mandalore. It was that you really couldn't make out any detail. right? I mean, with the when they look over the edge and they just see the ruins of the city down there, it was more that there was just no detail in it, right? It just all kind of washed together. You think you're seeing a city, maybe some pillars and stuff like that, but really it's just destruction, and just decay. And I like that we get some context though, that it looks like it's been, abandoned for hundreds of years, it's been like 25 at most, or maybe even only like 15. We don't know the exact timeline exactly here, but call it 20, 25 years. So at least a quarter of that time, if not significantly less than that,
right,
of how old Din thinks it looks based on this state of rapid decay there from what the Empire did to it.
Yeah, the just on that, I have it in my notes later, but we can talk about it now. I mean, there were architecturally, you could tell that was Sundari, like from the episodes of the Clone Wars and even from Rebels. It had the bones were there, but it was so like if you look close enough, you can see it. But it's just they did a great job of making it like almost unrecognizable to the average eye or whatever. But you can definitely see the pattern there, the DNA of what used to be Sundari and what used to be that Mandalorian architecture. It was still all there, but it was just like you said, such ruined, and it was so ruined that it was unrecognizable at the same time. So
well, and if for those that maybe don't remember the episodes or maybe aren't familiar with them, the reason why they had these big dome structures is because the rest of the land around Mandalore, while Din was saying that it was green once and very lush, well, in the Air of Clone Wars and all that, it was very arid. It was basically a desert.
yeah,
So that's why these fusion bombs were able to turn it to glass, and that's why you see that very shiny, almost what's the called, like a obsidian glass type of look to it.
yeah,
And so that's really cool that they brought all that in, right? And if you superheat sand, what do you get? You get glass. So it's good they brought all that in. It's basic science and all that, but still,
sure,
it was.
yeah,
It completely transformed the landscape though globally. I mean, they did such a thorough job that it looks like it was just kind of almost globally, at least around these major city centers.
When he made the comment to Grogu about this used to be all green, I thought, well, technically it's still green. It's just a different kind of green, more glass now than grass. But yeah, to your and then even going further back, right? The reason why it got to such a desolate kind of almost sand kind of planet with not as much vegetation is because this planet has been in perpetual war amongst the Mandalorian tribes and the Jedi for years, thousands of years. And so it's just a worn, torn planet that's kind of really, I mean, they've kind of, gone to these domes and living in these biodomes because everything else has just been so inhospitable at this point because of all the war and destruction that's happened over the years. Okay, so the last thing I just quickly as kind of opening thoughts is this was kind of a good moment for Grogu, I think. Like it was finally cemented that he is capable of taking on things by himself. He is able to kind of, I would say he's got a better control over the Force, and we're now seeing him use the Force without him being completely drained. I think this makes sense given the training that he went through with Luke Skywalker. He's not as fragile as he has been in more recent, or I guess the first two seasons. So this bodes well. I think it does well for the character development too, because now we don't have to worry about, he's got to go put the baby in a sitter, right? Go table him somewhere. It's kind of like Omega. She's now part of the group. We can trust her to kind of do things. We can trust Grogu to do things and know that they're going to be able to take care of themselves, which opens up a lot of new storytelling that I think we're going to need at this point, given the direction of where this show is going to go.
Right, but I like that his fine-tune ability in the Force is still very far off too. Like his ability to go and try to flip the switch or do something with the control panel when Din was trapped isn't there. He was sitting there trying to basically rip the whole thing apart or trying to open it up or something like that, right? And so I like that it's still developing. It's not just, he's not all of a sudden a really great Force user. He's better, he's good, but there's still, and we've seen this in some of the High Republic, had to mention it for 3 weeks in a row. But for the High Republic, they've had some of those comments too of focusing the Force in a more very specific way, in a very finite way, does take a lot of skill and does take a lot of effort. And it's not something that a Padawan typically has that level of control over to be able to do. And I believe actually some of that may have come from when I was re-listening to, what was the Darth Maul book, Shadow Hunter. So again, Legends, but again, a lot of that stuff still has come into canon, is still part of canon.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen some of it in High Republic lately.
Yep. Okay, well, that's kind of our opening thoughts. Let's get into, I guess, the story breakdown. And All right, so we get Pelimato from the beginning. I'm jumping ahead, but I don't want to bury the lead here. But we get the Boonta Eve. So that was our kind of first getting to see that again in a very long time, I guess, at this point. So good to see that that's still going on, and many lives are being lost on a yearly basis thanks to that race. But yeah, what did you think about this? I mean, she's got like a racket going on here. And the first thing that I thought of was
I was a little disappointed in her. I got to be
yeah,
honest with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You lost a tooth, and now you're turning into a bad. I mean, she's just on a decline in terms of as far as I'm concerned. But I thought of Kenobi with the Jawa. What was the Jawa's name that was stealing his parts and then selling them back to them?
Right.
So I thought, oh, okay, that Jawa's part of her little ring that she's got going on here on Tatooine, where they're stealing, from their own people and selling back to them. But
right.
Yeah, a little disappointed myself, all kidding aside, but I guess it's not a bad thing. You know what was on point, though, was her Jawaese. Like, Amy Sedaris, when she goes and starts speaking Jawaese, it was, like, perfect. I was like, oh, my gosh. At first, I wasn't watching her mouth. I thought it was a Jawa speaking, and then I realized, oh, it's her, until she says IG-11 circuit, like, in plain English at the very end there. But what are your thoughts on Pelimatum?
I didn't realize you spoke Jawa. I didn't realize you were just
a little bit. It's in my family, yeah.
Her dialect is absolutely picture perfect, huh?
Oh yeah, can't even tell.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed in her. I mean, I thought she held herself to a higher standard, but then again, they're all kind of scavengers on Tatooine. It makes a lot of sense. It was kind of cool though to get like a different perspective of Boonta Eve, or the Boonta Classic. We were of course officially associate with Anakin and with Tatooine, Phantom Menace, and all of that. So it was kind of cool. Now it's a bit of a Grand Prix, like around town. Which was
right through the city streets.
Yeah, we rack a higher body count than ever before. It keeps,
right, yeah.
Really pushing it to the next level. But and again, it wasn't Navarro like we had originally speculated with the fireworks. This is Tatooine and celebrating the eve of Boonta, whatever Boonta is. Now I'm kind of curious what Boonta is. Maybe if someone's out there, if they look that up and see what that.
I'm sure. I think it does have it. I think it has a something going on there in Legends or something. But
yeah, I'm sure there is. But. So it was kind of cool. It was a celebration, right? And again, the bit of the racket, it was amusing in that respect. Especially the Jawas were going to go hit the sauce really hard. They came back and the equivalent of like Mardi Gras beads. I mean, it's Mardi Gras season here. I'm just a couple of weeks removed from it. So it just that they have that in their back and they're like, what the heck, man? we're about to go have a good time. And now they're trying to get a memory circuit. But
that's disgusting. Like, how did they get their beads as Jawas? Like, I don't even, let's,
Albert,
never mind. Just move on, please.
Okay, we will.
No thanks.
We'll analyze this later. This is the after show. This is the after dark.
Yeah.
But I like that we didn't linger there too long. We did get all of the kind of the silly stuff with R5D4. You're built to fight tyranny and all this other thing. It was mildly amusing. It was kind of sweet, and seeing the fear with R5. He's a bit of a coward, and we all know that all the things behind that and from a certain point of view and all that. But I mean. But it was cool that it didn't linger. I liked that it just didn't linger too long, and that they got what they needed. I guess I question now: do we need IG-11? Is that
let's?
I mean, I'm assuming we'll still come back to that, but he just kind of gave up on it. I was like, okay, well, I guess an astromech will work, even though I didn't think it would work in the first place. So,
yeah, I mean, R2 was pretty versatile. I mean, he pretty much did anything, and I think they kind of proved that with other R2 units as well, both in canon and Legends, that they were just kind of a jack of all trades. I mean, yeah, they were astromech droids, but man, they had so many different abilities
different
and
sensor arrays and everything else. So
yeah, exactly.
Can you take an air sample? Yeah, cool. Let's go.
Sure. What do you need? You know, oil slick? Yeah, I got that too. Let's touch on the IG-11 thing. So, okay, so don't get me wrong. I love, as somebody that grew up with the original trilogy, I do like R5D4. It's very clear to me that Jon Favreau really likes R5D4, but he was always like that when you were playing Star Wars action figures circa 83, he was like the poor man's R2. If somebody already had R2, it's like, all right, well, I guess, I'll take R5. I mean, that's the only astromech they had. So
right. Yeah. That was the only one.
So that's what I'm saying. But it's very clear that he does love this character. And so I'm fine with that. But then it just feels like, okay, so are we tabling the IG-11? And I think from what we know of Dave Filoni, and certainly now of Jon Favreau, that's probably not the case, right? It may just be happenstance now, or, again, serendipitous, that suddenly we are going to have they're going to continue on with putting IG-11 back together in some form, and that may become valuable or crucial later on. what comes to mind is, again, not to jump ahead, and if anybody's gone in like spoiler free, I'm going to talk about something just very briefly that was in the trailers, all over the trailers, so it's something we've probably already seen. But there is those scenes again where Paz and the Children of the Watch are in what looks to be Navarro, right? In some kind of a battle. They've got their guns out, they're shooting stuff, whatever it is. And so, maybe that's the opportunity where he comes to life at that point and kind of helps contribute to whatever is happening there. We'll have to speculate on that at some point here soon, because maybe towards the very end, or maybe we'll do a Patreon episode on this, because I think it's super intriguing about where this series is going to go. Okay, so back to IG-11 though. So it does feel like it kind of got side-tabled just a little bit, or sidelined just a little bit, and maybe that's okay, because I think we will come back to it. But as I was watching it, I started to wonder, like, could they have just put these two episodes together, right? Like, if they had ended with them like, hey, you want, what did he say? All right, kid, you ready to go on for an adventure? And they flew off. If they would have found a way to end the episode right there, the first episode, and made it 45, 50 minutes long, squish some stuff out, maybe shove some things out, whatever it is, that probably could have worked. But when I started doing the math, it was like 30 minutes into this episode before we even got to this part, right? So, there was a lot there, so I totally get it. But okay,
yeah, it would have been, if they would have put these together, it would have been about an hour and 15 minutes.
Exactly.
So again, did you need all of the exposition in episode 1 or in chapter 17? Maybe not. You probably could have gotten rid of some of that stuff. But I think this would have made sense to do as a double premiere or something. It still would have been fine. And again, having a longer premiere, people always get into. But there was a lot of foreshadowing here, a lot of telegraphing what was going to happen with R5. Of course, he can pilot, he can navigate. I was like, okay, I guess we know he's going to do something here, right? I mean, they kind of tell you all these things, and when Den starts pointing out on the scopes where all the planets were, which actually I really enjoyed, like him saying, here, I was born on I grew up here on Concordia, right? And here's Calavella. Again, it was like, okay, well, that plus the R5 stuff, okay.
Right.
There's something's happening right here, right? So clearly something's going to go awry. And now I was like, I got to wait. I got to see it before I believe it, before Grogu pilots a ship or does something himself. But, it seemed like it was reasonable at that point.
Yeah, it was certainly telegraphed. Hey, before we move on I want to get into the getting back to Mandalore literally here in just a second. But there was one line that Pelimato said, and I didn't think much of it the first couple times I watched it. But then I wrote it down because it was intriguing, and I think you could take it a couple different ways. But when she's talking to Din Djarin and he's explaining, that he's back, and she gets excited and she says, are the Hutts back? And then she says, are you taking out Boba Fett? Okay, so I don't want to put too much into this, but then I thought, wait, what does she mean by are you taking out Boba Fett? Like, are you taking him out as in taking him to go do something? Or are you taking him out because he's turned into somebody that they're not happy with there on Mos Eisley, but on Tatooine? Any thoughts around that? Do you think they're foreshadowing anything there? I mean, she name dropped him. I know we're coming off the Book of Boba Fett, which, she was a part of. So maybe she wasn't happy with how things went down there since she lost a tooth, but found a man. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, maybe she lost her man. You never know. But, I didn't think too much of it because he is a bounty hunter and he was there on business, and a little bit surprising. We didn't leave Book of Boba Fett on bad terms in any kind of stretch. I mean, everything was actually on the up and up and felt pretty good. So that something would have turned and done, gone in a different direction seems a bit unlikely. But yeah, it was a very odd way to, again, it kind of felt like I couldn't figure out if she was just name dropping to say, hey, the Book of Boba Fett stuff happened, go watch it again. Or if it was more, you're right. No, something has gone on since he's been gone. And again, our concept of time here is always difficult, of how long someone's been gone and what's the time frame. It doesn't seem like it's been that long since Boba Fett left them. Less than a year, probably 6 months, something like that. Yeah, I mean, we're in that time frame seems pretty comfortable. For stuff to go that far south seemed a bit unlikely, but it was a curious comment though. It was definitely something to kind of take note and just think about later on. Is if we do pick up any other details though, then and him get mentioned. If we go back to Tatooine, because it seems like we're going to go back at least once or twice a season minimum. Yeah, it would be interesting to see if that comes back again and to see if there's more meat on that bone to pick from. You're on mute.
So Miss Sunflower says, lost a tooth, lost her man, found a Jawa, which sounds like a Tatooine country song.
She found a bunch of Jawas.
Well, she's, yeah. Ugh. Let's not talk about that again. Okay, so from there, this is where they finally take off. And, you know, when he said that, do you want to go find some adventure, kid? The first thing that came to mind was Yoda talking about adventure, excitement, that kind of thing.
Right.
But they get out there, and we get a perfect setup of, look, here's this planet and here's that planet, and if you're going to have to go here, it's only right here. Just pointing that out for later in the episode. And there was the mention of he says that back when the songs were written, and I thought this was a really cool way. The way I interpreted this was the prophecies, right? Like there were prophecies, and rather than just being scripted out, that they were weaved into songs in Mandalore, which I did never know that the Mandalorians sang. I don't remember that ever being part of their culture, but I love this idea that that's something that's there, right? That, and maybe they don't mean that literally songs, but that's what came to mind for me.
I think they do. I mean, every culture has songs.
Sure. Yeah.
Like literally every single culture has songs. It would make a lot of sense for Mandos too.
Yeah. Even the Tusken Raiders, they've got songs.
Even the Jawas.
And yeah, why do we keep talking? I don't want to talk about Jawas anymore. We're past that. We've already left Tatooine.
We are culturally diverse on this show.
There's so we get to I guess what I'm calling the roots of Mandalore. He mentions that everybody can trace their heritage back to Mandalore, except the Fets.
Well, in the foundlings, I guess. I mean, yeah, this is
Well,
where things get
yeah,
a little.
no.
Things get a little. It's not every person. It's kind of every family,
Family,
if you will.
clan. Yeah.
Yeah, clan's probably a better way of putting it. Yeah, because they are, again, all a bit nomadic and all a bit. You acquire family along the way of sorts. So a bit of an interesting comment there, but again, not one to be taken too literally or too. To figure. Yeah, just too literally.
Well, even the Fets too. I mean, they were brought in as foundlings. Essentially, Jango was, right, saved by a Mandalorian, and so that's their clan. So I mean, I get it. It was a cool statement about how that is the mother world, really, is what it all comes down to.
Exactly.
Or the mothership, I guess, at some point, or the motherland. How about that? So, Mando grew up on Concordia. Had they confirmed that before? Was that the first time we had ever got confirmation of that?
I don't know. I
could not remember.
No. I want to say we presumed that, or maybe we just presumed that from the armor. I think the armor there may have been something there with the armor and stuff. I don't remember if we actually got that from Din himself, but I think we just always presumed that was the case. We made an educated guess, and we were right, Albert.
Okay,
great job.
Yeah, I mean, because I think when we were talking about, I think it was during, when we were kind of talking about Mandalore and all the planets and weapons and all that stuff. I think at that point we were kind of speculating that was likely the case, but nonetheless, this was confirmation that this is where he did kind of grow up as a foundling, and that's essentially where the Children of the Watch were primarily founded before they kind of were scattered like all the other clans.
Right, yeah, and Miss Sunflower coming in armor talked about Concordia. So, and I believe that's where Death Watch was more or less stationed as well.
They operated out of there. Yeah,
so again, all those dots connect pretty closely. So that all makes sense. And thanks, Miss Sunflower, for taking a look there for us.
So there was so at this point he's kind of flying into the atmosphere. I mean, he goes from really beautiful to suddenly just stormy, and then we get to see all the devastation. This is so minor, but I enjoy it. I really love the fact that they held on that shot of the N1 kind of just flying in the atmosphere for a little bit, because it was just beautiful. I mean, beautifully done in terms of whether that was practical effects or CGI effects. But a lot of times we just get a cut shot, or we see it very quickly and they bust away. And for whatever reason, we got to see him kind of just swerving and flying, which, I don't know. It was great to see that. But really, this was there was no communication here. He mentions that because of the fusion. The atmosphere was completely changed at this point, as probably a lot of things are. So no communications.
Magnetic field is all disrupted. Yeah.
Right. And, so lack of communication can really only mean one thing.
Invasion.
So if the Phantom Menace taught us nothing else, we at least know that.
That's right.
So we get to the surface of Mandalore, and sure enough, it's completely glass. I mean, it was very cool aesthetically looking. I mean, unfortunate that happened to, the planet itself, but aesthetically looks like
and all the people, right? But yeah, sure.
The people too. I meant that, but it was kind of like Krypton is what it reminded me of, is, with the glass everywhere. And then we get R5 kind of being typical R5, like you mentioned earlier. He's a scaredy cat. I'm trying to remember, like, whether or not, I guess it's not truly canon. I mean, it's canon, but it's subjective, I guess. But it's the from a certain point of view book and that story with him, right? About whether he was force sensitive or not. I mean, this is all very much in character of him. No, stop doing that. See, you're dropping your shoulders and moving your head to the side because I said force sensitive, which I know is a touchy subject for you, but they did kind of allude to that in that story. So either way, what was consistent here is that R5 is not, he's not R2D2, right? He is somebody who, it would rather not run. And I thought it was hilarious that he says that wasn't a question when he asked him to go to the air sample.
Right.
And then he literally just kicks him to the curb. It was the most abrupt, passive aggressive ejection of a droid.
And then he called him a baby.
Ever seen.
Don't be a baby about it either.
Yeah.
Gosh. Shaming him into service. Jeez.
Yeah. And of course, Grogu's looking out for him, right? Because he was worried about him. He's like, fine, we'll put the tracker on. You can watch him from, the safety of here. And so let's get to let's jump ahead. So, he gets lost. Mando jumps out. He pressurizes his suit. And we kind of get into this battle with, I guess, what were they called? The Almanites? Is that right? Alamites?
Alamites, yeah.
Alamites.
Alarites or something.
Alamites. I didn't catch I caught the name, but I didn't put the subtitles on for the full name. So somebody save us in the chat as usual, please. But yeah, so let's talk about that fight because it was very clear. I think they made it very clear that he's still struggling to hold the Darksaber, to wield it as freely as maybe, a Bo-Katan was able to wield it later. More on that later. So Alamites, thank you, Miss Sunflower. So I want to talk about that just quickly. So he's still struggling with the Darksaber. I don't think that's unexpected, but there was some comments that were made from Jon Favreau and from Dave Filoni. So it was in the podcast that they had done. They did a podcast Q&A with some podcasters, not us, but some podcasters, some friends of ours too. Sky Talkers was one of the groups, and this question came up about the Darksaber, and it was, I would say, it was confirmed if it had not already been. And I just want to bring this up, that the Darksaber really is kind of like, the sword in the stone. Like it's almost like Thor's hammer. You have to be worthy of wielding it in order for the Darksaber to kind of do what you want to do. Now, this isn't a new concept. We saw this with Sabine in Star Wars Rebels. She had a very difficult time at first trying to wield the Darksaber. It was heavy. So there's consistency there, but it was through Kanan that she realized that she was able to kind of come out and feel more comfortable about her abilities, right? Maybe, I'm not saying that she was going to be the next Mandalore, but she felt more comfortable with her abilities and felt more comfortable with herself, that sword became lighter. And so for Din Djarin, it's still the case. He's still having a problem there, but Bo-Katan, it's not. I don't know. What did you think about the fight? And do you think there's anything that they're signaling in terms of ultimately who's going to be wielding this thing as the true Mandalorian? And we can jump ahead now about whether or not you think that's going to be Bo-Katan versus Din Djarin, or I said Paz is kind of like a really crazy whacked out theory, but any thoughts around where this could go at this point?
Well, and there's another conversation about whether or not the Darksaber will lose any kind of significance with some of the unveilings at the end of this episode, right? Of whether or not it loses some of its importance. I like that he's still struggling with it because it just shows that he's not really doing anything with it. He's not doing anything to change it. He's not learning anything new. He hasn't had any additional training or coaching from anyone, aside from what he had with the armor, which was brief. So it makes a lot of sense that he's still fighting it and that he's not doing it. And I like the comparisons with Bo, where she just picks it up and is just a natural with it. But again, it's something that she feels, it feels right to hold it, right?
Yeah,
It feels right to wield this thing and to, while it's probably a bit bittersweet, it's just natural. She was trained for this her whole life. It is who she is. It is her very her very persona, and it embodies everything about her. And so it's just so natural. Now, again, the question is whether or not that this is not foreshadowing, but at least it builds that journey for Din whenever he does finally accept it. And maybe it's through Bo-Katan that he finally achieves that. Like, she's the one who lets go of her ego, and maybe the living waters and some of the things they've seen, maybe this is a moment for her to where she decides that, okay, the Darksaber, it needs to be wielded by someone. It needs to bring our people together. If some of the things she was talking about that, it makes her sick to her stomach, that, that their people are fighting one another, they're tearing themselves apart, they're weakening themselves. They've made themselves weak, not anybody else. The only people we have to blame are ourselves. that she finally lets go of her own ego and says, look, someone's got to wield this thing. Someone has to lead our people. I need to do my part, regardless of what that role is. And so it's going to be curious if she will at least do what like Kanan did for Sabine, and take some of those lessons to heart and come back and bring those over to Din. But as of right now, I mean, she seems like the natural successor with it, right? Because it's just her. She just picks it up and goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we can talk about it now because I had it as a question to talk about at the very end. Why don't we table this? Let's save it for the very end because I think it's one of the more open-ended questions or open to discussion questions that I think we leave this episode with. But I do want to come back and kind of touch on it.
If anyone's curious, we are going to spoil everything about this episode, by the way. So we're kind of beating around the bush right now and burying, some of the stuff that comes later, but we will spoil everything. So if you've not watched it and you're hesitant about it, come back and watch us once you've had a chance to watch the episode, but we are going to spoil everything.
So I think what really my big takeaway from this particular scene though was that the words Din Djarin spoke were Bo-Katan was right. Like he said it verbally, right? Confirming like this was that first kind of like chink in the armor or hole in the dam.
But do you agree with that? Do you agree that Mandalore is not cursed? Because it was poison. Poison and cursed seem like very different things to me. So what is it that they're actually meaning by Mandalore is cursed?
Like the way I think for him and the Zealots, they took it literally. Like if you go there, something terrible is going to happen to you. It's either not, and I don't even think they were talking about physically, although that's probably part of it, right? You leave from there and now you got radiation poison, things happen. That's how I view it. But I think for him going there, and I think it put doubt in his belief of what the armorer was telling him or what the clan has been telling them. Or, I think for him, that was enough to like, okay, well, wait a second. If that's not true, then what else is not true? Like it's just challenging his beliefs is really what's going on here. The same thing for Bo-Katan. Like she's a little bit later.
I like that she has just as many realizations as Din does. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like the opposite.
More. Yeah.
Right. So they're on kind of different ends, right? In terms of like beliefs and all that. Right. So Bo-Katan, Din Djarin, I feel like is starting to lose some of his beliefs, which is probably a good thing because it's centering him. And Bo-Katan, right? We kind of got a sense from her a little bit later that her father at least believed in some of this stuff, maybe to some extent. But they at least went through the rituals, right? So it's almost like somebody who used to be of faith. Like I think about it, I'm jumping ahead, but it's fine. I think about it like from, my parents' perspective and even beyond that. If I go back in my generations, they're very stout religious people, like hardcore religion, right? And as time has gone on, that has kind of shifted away from our family in a lot of different ways. What I mean by that is like, so I think for me personally, the faith is still there, but it's not nearly as strong as my mother or my father. And it's probably not nearly even close to the strength, the faith that my grandparents had. And so the way when that scene is happening, when she's talking about her dad and about the rituals, I think from her perspective, it's like, oh yeah, we were kind of just going through the motions because people wanted to see this and we were the kings. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. But at the same time, I feel like her father and probably generations beyond that kind of did believe in some of this stuff. And so what I'm saying is for Din, it is kind of the losing of a little bit of faith. And I think for Bo-Katan, it's the regain of some of that faith. Both are moving kind of back to the center. And I think ultimately, whoever is going to lead Mandalore, whether it be through symbolic gestures or artifacts or beliefs, I think they're going to have to figure out what that common ground is. And that's probably going to be a more centric view to kind of be able to pull everybody to get in and convince them that that's where they all need to be. So
yeah, for Bo-Katan, it's very much about embracing your story, embracing your heritage in a place where she seems to have taken that for granted. Yeah. She was put on this pedestal. She was the princess. And while she understood the kind of the pomp and circumstance of all of it, and, it was the dog and pony show for their subjects and whatever. And her tone was a little bit, very, very hoity-toity of sorts, right? She recognized their station above their people. Although I don't know that people should really interpret it that way. It definitely came out that way, but I like that she has to be the one to embrace the heritage and the culture where everyone else has done it in such a, arguably dogmatic way and just overzealous kind of way. Mm-hmm. But again, you're right. The children of the Watch also have to let go of some of their rigidity of some of this and some of their their animosity and some of their misgivings and about what they believe to be true without evidence, or maybe without recent evidence, and knowing that, hey, we all can do something, but we have to do something different as well, right? So I'm with you. I like that they both have to shed some of that, and they also have to embrace another aspect of their culture and their heritage and one another in order for this to come back together. But also like the irony where she's the one talking about how much it pains her that they fight one another, but yet she is not always she's not always helping that scenario either get stronger. And the way that she, basically badmouthed Boba Fett right away, or they kind of side and look at Den. Oh, you're a child of the Watch. I mean, they have these biases too that they've still got to work through, and so the irony is still there that they need to cast that aside too. So it'd be really interesting to see where this shifts.
This is all good stuff for Bo-Katan. Like, she is really starting to be fleshed out as an incredible character, a very deep, complex character. You think about even back in Clone Wars, right? If people don't realize, she was fighting against her own sister. Like, she was part of it.
She was kind of the villain for a little bit. Yeah,
exactly. And they took her. Eventually, she got to the good side. But she was introduced as somebody who was very much the thing that she's now saying she hated, fighting, right? She was against all of she didn't like the peace that her sister was trying to bring about. And she was in constant battle with other Mandalorian clans. And again, eventually she came around to that. But yeah, I mean, there's almost a bit of like pretentiousness about her. And up until now, I think she's always had a level of pretentiousness about her, depending on what group she was with, whether she was part of the Watch, or whether she was, or Death Watch, versus whether she's now part of the Night Owls or whether she was part of royalty. She's always kind of had this idea that I'm better than everybody else. And I think she's been really humbled at this point, right? We saw her probably at her lowest moment doing nothing but sitting in a throne, an empty throne with no power, feeling sorry for herself. And suddenly she gets this call to action, which we'll get to here in a little bit. And I think this is kind of another stage of her life that we're starting to see. And this is going to be a big fundamental change and a lot of growth for her character in different ways. So excited to see all that happen if it does. So, okay, so let's go back to Mandalore. They decide they're going to jump down into their really cool shot of them kind of just ascending. The scale was really awesome to kind of see how far they had to go down, and just, again, the level of destruction even that far down in there. Really cool shot of them coming down there. They get to the very bottom. There was that moment when Grogu gets a little spooked out. I guess it was like the little alligator dragon things or whatever he saw.
Right. Yeah.
And then he presses the gas, right, to speed up a little bit further and get closer to Dad.
He has quite the control over his little unit these days. Over his
and it's funny because we were watching as part of the rewatches for season 1, season 2, and we were doing this from a certain point of view, top threes. Remember, Mando was controlling that little pram thing for a number of episodes, and now it's, he's got the stick shift and the pedals and the gas and the nitrous oxide or whatever else he's got going on there. So good for him that he's finally in control of his own vehicle. They come across the helmet, which there was a lot of speculation. I mean, you can't put like a creepy looking old helmet in there and not make you can't help but wonder where that came from. It turns out it really was probably not Tar Vizsla's helmet. Like I think people were speculating about, ourselves included, but it did turn out to be that looks like there were a number of Mandalorians that either had gone through there. Here's the thing. I couldn't tell from the scale, like how old that thing was. Like to Bo-Katan's point, it could have been a recent one, right? Or it could have been something that was there forever. But I think it was a really cool setup because I was not expecting that bear trap thing. And we'll talk about what the heck that thing was, but whatever it was that snapped up and picked him up at that point. What did you ever get a name on that thing? Like, did they ever say what it was, either in the subtitles or?
No, they called it a creature. That was about it. And they would just describe the creature and the spines it had when it was, detaching from the skeletal form. But no, there was no. I couldn't find anything that said specifically what it was. I've seen a lot of speculation about what the eye was and what maybe the original being might have been, but I kind of discredit some of that too. I'm not sure. So some people believe that it was a Geonosian, like an eye. And now, granted, it looks like a Geonosian to me.
It does kind of look like an eye, yeah, from a Geonosian. But
the Geonosian eyes are usually black, and this one was yellow with a black pupil. And so I don't know, but the way that the eye slit was, and the skin and all of that. But yeah, it was very much, and people were curious why didn't it need the blood, things like that too. But there was a meat sac kind of part of the body when it pulls itself out of the big spider rig up or whatever. Yeah, so it seemed like he was trying to feed of some sorts.
Maybe it was a Dianoga. Just in like, no?
That would be kind of interesting. Except the Dianogas, don't they have like a red eye?
I don't
remember.
I don't know.
I
It
don't
was
know.
a joke. I mean, they live in water.
Like Jawas have red eyes and yellow eyes. I suppose they can all have something different too. It's been a number of years now, so why not?
Yeah. Conceptually, though, I really liked it. Like, it was very different for Star Wars, but it still felt Star Wars. Because I mean, it felt like it was still rooted. I mean, we had General Grievous, which is probably the most, suitable kind of comparison to something like that. Half, weight like 95% machine, 5% living being of some sort. The
Very
fact that it was
similar,
like,
yeah.
what's that?
Very similar, to Grievous in that regard.
Yeah. Rob just chimed in, said kind of like a Bomar monk.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, very interesting in terms of its design. I love the fact that it had kind of like 3 forms, I guess, or whatever. It was kind of like the creepy head with the legs or whatever that thing scuttled off. I mean, that was really bizarre and frightening. But then it had its like, arachnid spider General Grievous mode. And then it had like its Hulkbuster armor on there at the very beginning when it kind of captured him. But the whole concept of like how it, the way it was kind of waiting there, like it had to have been just sitting there waiting for God knows how long. And then suddenly it springs to life, captures him, traps him, and then goes through this process of like literally draining his blood with this poor pump droid, whatever that thing was, to kind of suck his blood out. All of that was kind of really dark, if you ask me, for Star Wars. Like we usually don't get some of that stuff.
Well, and right when it trapped it, I didn't really catch it the first time because, like you were saying at the beginning of the episode, it was a little bit dark, but it actually injects like a needle into his neck in order to, I'm guessing, subdue him or something like that. So I didn't catch that. I was like, man, he must be really squeezing him tight for him to be so worn out or whatever it was. But no, it looks like he was drugged.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this was really dark, actually. I mean, this was downright like, I can imagine for some smaller children, this may have been a little bit scary. Maybe for some slightly older children too, a little bit scary. It was very creepy, and one of these things, especially when you cut out with the spines that started to expand and all the tubes and the gross looking eye and all of that, and then you start to bleeding out the Mandalorian, and you can hear him grunting. I mean, that's a little bit disturbing. That brings, I think Jeff said in the at the beginning of the chat, welcome to your next nightmare for Star Wars. It seems like we've got a lot of these lately where you're going to have bad dreams tonight based on what we've watched on Star Wars, whether it's Mandalorian or Bad Batch or whatever it is.
Yeah. Has anybody checked on Lauren? Is she okay after this scene?
Oh, she's fine.
She is. She said scary. Jeff says, I was like, hell no, when that first walked out of the big machine. And then I was like, oh, hell no, when that son of a bee woke up and crawled out again. So, yeah, I think it creeped out a lot of different people. Riley says, no, thank you. She doesn't like spiders. So I think, so either way, like this was a really good sequence. I really enjoyed it. I think this is where the shadows and the darkness kind of played to the advantage too, because I mean, if there were more lighting, I think this would have been even more terrifying, but I didn't even catch that needle thing you're talking about. I want to go back and watch it now. So, yeah, probably a good idea that they kind of did all of that. And then poor baby Grogu, like Baby Yoda sitting there watching his dad just get, processed, for lack of a better term. But yeah, he was able to kind of come in there and started using the Force. I thought he was going to do it. Like I thought he was going to rescue him in some way, but it goes to show you that he does have more control over it. But I mean, he doesn't know what exactly he's trying to do, right? He's probably just trying to dislodge the cage of some sort. Whatever it was didn't work though.
It's one thing to use the Force for brute force, if you will, lowercase f. But another to have that fine tuned and actually know what you want to do and be able to specifically do a more fine tuned activity. So I like that he's not there yet. I think that's important for him to still have lots of opportunity for growth. And again, I know he healed somebody, whatever, big deal. Everybody can do it. Ray can do it.
Okay, stop it.
Everybody can heal everybody these days.
Everybody can heal everyone.
But no, but some things are more like a natural intuition type of thing, and that's how I kind of view Force healing in some ways.
Yeah,
you can do it a bit more naturally just because it's a feeling, as compared with this one where you're trying to like turn a knob or something like that, and using the Force like you're using your fingers seems like a little bit different.
Right. So Lauren chimed in. She finally said, "I was so worried about Grogu this whole scene, I couldn't bear it." So I believe you. It was a little disturbing. There's I guess I don't know what it was trying to do outside of suck its blood. It put it like, it was like on a rotisserie, like a, well, it's
like
spigot thing. It was like, like a spit where he's going to turn and baste him over,
Well, it was messed up too because when he plugged him in with the tube, he like turned him on his side to make sure you could drain it right into.
Oh,
It. Like,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
my gosh. Now it's a gravity fed bloodletting tube. Nice job, Rachel and
Yep.
John.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
I think I don't. I'm probably not going to find it. So
Plasma anytime soon.
Maybe that's all it was. He was just trying to collect plasma for his grandmother that was dying in the cave right next to them.
It was the blood drive. The bus was just off scene. You couldn't see it. Yeah,
couldn't see
the
it.
blood carried the blood drive. Yeah.
This has all been a misunderstanding, folks. So Jeff mentioned it earlier. He mentioned that this creature was the rightful leader of Mandalore because technically it did win the Darksaber in combat, and he did pick it up. So even though he did toss it to the side, I think it's safe to say this probably was going to be the rightful heir.
Wait. All right. So question. Do you have to defeat someone while they're using the Darksaber to claim the Darksaber, or you just have to beat them in battle, period?
I think that's I know you're joking, but I think that's...
No, I'm not joking. It's actually a serious... Yeah, no, because I'm pretty sure they have to be wielding the Darksaber in order to win the Darksaber in combat. Beating someone and then stealing it from them off their belt, I don't think counts.
Okay, so yes, I would. Since we're going here, I would say yes. The Darksaber has to be out. It has to be ignited. You have to be using it in order to win it from somebody, technically speaking. But that said, all joking aside, air quotes, joking aside, I think that's the point of this. I think that's the point of where they're going here. It's like people get lost in the technicalities of this stuff, really, and losing what the meaning and the purpose of these symbols are, right? And I think that'll get resolved here at some point. But yes,
because I mean, in theory, Bo-Katan picking up the Darksaber and fighting with it is applying another curse on her, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, no one should use it in combat like that unless they have won it.
Yeah,
it's a gray area.
That's gray. I would agree. Yeah, I can see it both ways. Okay, so anyways, we're talking about rotisserie chickens and Mando.
That's right. Yeah.
Grogu finally he tells him to get out of there. He runs off, and this is where we get to see him like fully competent, jumping in his ride, getting off there, zipping back up to the top. I don't know what happened to that Alamite. What did he do to it? Like I saw him force push it, but then they cut away, and the next thing you know, he's like back flipping into the N1.
Yeah, I think he just knocked him out, and he hightailed it to the N1 and left.
I would have liked it in my head canon. Like he crushed his soul off camera because he was so angry, right? Because he's tampered with the dark side. When he was starting to force choke Cara Dune.
I mean, he was so scared. Not angry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
yeah,
scared.
So scared. Right. That they couldn't show exactly what had happened. I think he did something pretty gruesome to that thing though. Before he jumped into the N1 starfighter and Google, made little gaga noises.
And then he got in the ship and he found Din's brand new Amblin rifle and shot him.
Yeah. Started squeezing off a few rounds of that thing before he got out of there. Okay, so he leaves. He takes off, heads to Concordia, and we get to, or not Concordia, Calvella, which is where House Kryze is at. And I thought it was cute. I love the fact that Bo-Katan was like, "All right, I'm going to put an end to this. Like this dude just keeps showing up. I already told him I don't want to talk to anybody." Again, I think she's at her worst point. I think. she's completely bottomed out. Hit rock bottom at this point. And her whole mood changes when she realizes that it's the baby because he's so, how can you not like the baby and the fact that he's there by himself? It was her call to action at this point. And I think this is really going to set her on a different path going forward.
I like that she didn't hesitate. It makes you feel good about the character of Bo-Katan that she just did what was the right thing to do and went to go help. Didn't think twice about it. As irritated as she was, and Din's always kind of been a thorn in her side in some way, and so it was great that it was natural and there's no doubt about it, no question. Let's go save him. Let's go figure out what's going on.
Yeah. She's like a M&M, right? Hard outer shell, soft on the inside, melts in your mouth, not in your hands. That's probably not appropriate.
No,
okay, let's just move on.
Yeah.
So she jumps in her own ship, which is really cool. Getting to see the Mandalorian ship. What the heck are they called again?
Gauntlets, I believe.
Gauntlets, yeah, thank you. I almost said Vindicators, but they're not. They're the Gauntlets. Getting to see a gauntlet in action, which we see in the trailer. Remember, there's that one scene where we see one flying.
Yep.
Like, I think that's the same one now. So I think that's confirming that is Bo-Katan's. Whether she's flying it or not, it's another story, but that is hers, isn't it?
Yeah, we get the close up of the ship where it's kind of on the front and it's vibrating as she's coming through the atmosphere. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, it seems to be the same one from the trailers.
Yeah. Her returning to, I mean, they don't really get into this a lot, but again, more headcanon, or at least what was going through my mind as I'm watching these scenes. But that's got to be a weird, surreal feeling, because I got the impression that since the Purge and since the Night of a Thousand Tears, that she had not been to Mandalore, and this is her first time kind of seeing, maybe firsthand, the level of destruction, right? Because she makes so many comments throughout here, and then a little bit later with Din Djarin, as she's kind of giving them the, the tour of the dump that is Mandalore now. But this had to be kind of shocking and surreal to kind of see how far, I mean, just firsthand what the level of destruction was for her, and all those memories of like what life was like when she was a ruler growing up as a kid. There's probably a really powerful moment here, powerful storytelling that they probably just didn't have time for, but had to be a little unsettling for her.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhat traumatic too. But again, it kind of makes you wonder, like, how did she know some of the other things where she was saying it's not cursed? It don't believe what you see. That there is something redeeming about Mandalore. There's still a disconnect there. So where's that? Where was she getting that information if she hasn't been back to Mandalore? Because I'm with you. It really seemed like she hasn't been, or maybe she has been, and it just experiencing it with somebody else is a very different scenario than it maybe with Grogu in particular, right? So a young one, it's kind of like when you go take a trip with your grandfather or your grandmother, right? And you just hear all these stories about the area they grew up in. You're going to the family reunion, you're going out, the family ranch or the family farm. You just hear the stories, right? And they used to tell you about, well, this was over here, and this town used to not look like this. You go out to the old cemetery. I mean, all the different things, right? It kind of felt like that. And when you're presented with another generation to talk to and to share that history, it all comes out like it is brand new, and you're almost like reliving it to an extent.
Yeah.
So again, but it was a little bit difficult to understand if this really was her first time, or if there was other times she had been, and it was just recalling, just kind of reliving the moments through someone else's eyes for a moment.
Yeah, well, I think so. To answer your question, it's probably two things. One, she had her own group of people up until she lost the Darksaber, right? So even after all the destruction, there were still people with her. So, there may have been scouts, there may have been people, there may have been rescue missions that went out there to try to save whatever they could, and maybe she got reports of the current condition, the current state of Mandalore from in that. And then Miss Sunflower's bringing it up, and I think we talked about it in the last episode, or it was, I think it was the last episode, or it might have been during the final hype, that it's in the best interest of the Empire to keep people away from Mandalore, right? We're making a huge assumption here, but to reiterate some of the speculation that we put forth a few weeks ago, were that the Empire, after the Empire came into power, after the Senate had been abolished, and really the last kind of group that could have put any kind of fight up against them would have been the Mandalorians, right? And so what better way to ensure that they never rise to power than to take advantage of them in this weakened state, as Bo-Katan talked about, right? That they had been fighting for so long that they couldn't fend off the Empire, but put them down forever. So they don't have to worry about these guys ever rising up, turn their planet to glass, and put an end to them. And then on top of that, to ensure that they don't go back, then you start the Imperial propaganda machine and start, leaking stories of how cursed it is. Like, I mean, we didn't really talk about this, but you said earlier, like, whether or not this thing was technically cursed, what did that mean? There are probably a lot of propaganda stories that the Empire set forth so that people like the Children of the Watch or the Zealots, the people that kind of believe this stuff and buy into this stuff, are never going to go back because of, spooky theories and spooky tales, right? So I think there's probably some aspects, some truth in the Empire helping to kind of push that narrative.
Maybe, but from what I mean, even Boba Fett knew that it was glass, so it seems like there was some amount of validation of what they did, and it was. I mean, it is very much, a lot of it is accurate, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what would be really cool, though, is if the armor somehow finds a way, because she's got a shard of this stuff. It would be really cool if the resurgence of the Mandalorian wasn't necessarily around Beskar, but it was some other unique property about this glass that they are able to transform that into something else from an armor perspective, or something. That would be kind of a neat twist on all of it, in order to I don't know, kind of get their swagger back in some ways, but also take something that the Empire took away from them, but it provided another gift in another way. They just had to kind of restructure and change their way of thinking.
I like that idea. I do. Tease that out. See what we can come up with, or what you can come up with. Yeah, and call Dave on that, will you? Because I'm sure there's time to get to shoehorn that into this this season. But if not, we can get it in season 4 if we need to. No, seriously, though, I think that's a cool idea.
I'll call it Favloni tomorrow.
Okay, good job. Let me know how that goes. Okay, so we were talking about her returning to Mandalore. She talks about how once it was a beautiful civilization. She says, my family ruled it all. Now it's a tomb. And there's just lots and lots of destruction. So all in hand with everything else that we've kind of talked about. I did like that she was talking about, she did tell Grogu that at one point, hey, we weren't always, I guess, bad guys. We weren't always fighting each other. There was actually a period of time when we worked really well with the Jedi. And she's kind of, it's a very one-sided conversation, unfortunately. But she's saying all the right things and asking the right things, at least from us as viewers, because it did bring up images and reminders that, she was running around with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka and, Sabine. Well, not Sabine was a Jedi, but Anakin Skywalker. Who else was in that mix? I'm trying to think from Clone Wars, she was running around in Rebels as well. Kanan. She was running around with Kanan for a while. So, yeah, she has a relationship with the Jedi, which I think is important here, that they have not always kind of been that way. So that is a sign of, I guess, progression for the Mandalorian tribe. So she does make a comment, too, about hey, you must be pretty good in the Force because, you made your way over to me. So, again, no feedback from him.
Right.
Just
no confirmation that R5 did most of the work, but he did. Yeah,
he wasn't gonna say that.
But he did have to jump really far, and he did have to, force knock the garbage out of a Alamite. So
yeah,
those count.
I was reminded of the line from, I think it was the Force Awakens, where she's like, "Oh, you must be very strong," when Chewbacca's getting his
medical attention.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought, you're so brave.
You're so brave.
Yes.
Okay. So now Bo-Katan. So she gets her moments, right? Finally fighting the Alamites once they get back in there and they're looking for Bando. I did love the fact that, she's fully capable of taking care of herself without the Darksaber, right?
Right.
There was she really, you couldn't tell that wasn't Mando fighting. It was very similar in terms. Oh, and by the way, I think it's Joanna Bennett, I think is her name. She was the one that played the female Tusken Raider that I gush about all the time. I follow her on Instagram, and I'm pretty sure she's in the credits as Bo-Katan's
stunt double.
Stunt double, yeah. So all the fight scenes that were going on is her again, which, that's awesome.
She's pretty amazing.
She's pretty great. So, yeah, and then she makes that comment about, oh, did you think your dad? We finally get that from the trailer. Did you think your dad was the only Mandalorian?
We've checked a lot of the trailer boxes off after just the first 2 episodes.
Well, and that's probably a good thing. That bodes well for us, because I think there's going to be a lot here that we just are going to be pure, no pun intended, but we're going to be very much in the dark with here very shortly.
Right.
The Alamites, they give us that little bit about how they live. Not that it's important, but it does sound like it is kind of, okay, this post-apocalyptic Mandalore. These things used to live out on the outskirts, right? Up in the mountains or whatever it was. And now, because of everything that happened, they've moved in to where, the food is better. I guess I don't know what these things eat. But yeah, give us some explanation there.
Apparently Mandalorians eat.
And not a lot left. So, but she made the comment about, so I wonder what else could have survived. And again, that could be foreshadowing it could mean a lot of things. It could have been a foreshadowing of the mythosaur that we see at the very end. It could be foreshadowing for more Mandalorian clans or people that are on the planet somewhere, stranded, living in this post-apocalyptic Mandalore in some way, right? Getting by however they can. It could be people that follow her. It could be people from other clans and all that. So I think there's an opportunity here from a storytelling perspective to really kind of open the floodgates of, there's a lot here that's not really gone, even though the stories and the propaganda or whatever say happened.
Yeah, again, you have to let go of what you think you know. And start to embrace what's possible now.
Yeah. She eventually catches up with Mando, and this is where she gets the Darksaber. And she does. This is another freaking great fight.
I love how she picks it up. I mean, it's like
yeah.
it's like the Mandalorian equivalent of using the Force, using her little zip cord and then pulling it to herself.
Yep.
That was so cool.
That's exactly what it was. It reminded me of, I mean, I know we've had a lot of love for the Indiana Jones series, but you know, I mean, you could use that was the bullwhip kind of thing as well if you wanted to, but just the way it was shot, it looked very similar to like a Jedi reaching out with the Force the way she did and pulling it into her. So
it was it was so cool. It was such a great parallel. Yeah.
So yeah, good stuff there. We got to see, you know, she's using the cable. She got to use that little buckler thing that I think Paz. I guess I didn't realize that they all had this thing, but Paz did, right? In season 1 and 2, I think.
And Book of Boba Fett, yeah, he had it when they were fighting.
Well, when they were combating the duel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the duel, right?
Yep. So yeah, definitely no problem holding the lightsaber. Again, this speaks to, I guess, her confidence and her belief that she's worthy of wielding this sword. Now, whether she's worthy of being the leader, I think is a totally different question. I don't think they're mutually exclusive yet. I mean, that may change as we get, you know, more and more information about, you know, how the Darksaber works and some of the lore and the history behind it. But for now, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. So I think she is fully capable of wielding the Darksaber without being, you know, at a disadvantage because of the weight or whatever it is, certainly feeling worthy of it. But that doesn't necessarily make her a good leader. And I think if anybody knows that, that's her, right? She's kind of lived that firsthand already.
Right. And again, it's a little bit different than just believing you can wield it and just having the confidence to wield it, because clearly Paz Vizsla had that in abundance of thinking that he was the rightful heir and all the other stuff. So it is clearly a lot more to wielding the Darksaber and embracing it and forming some sort of connection with it in order to wield it successfully. So I like that she's able to do it, but every other character really seems to struggle with it. And again, we didn't really see the armorer wield it. We just saw her kind of evaluate it. So we didn't get a good feel for how it felt in her hands. Mm-hmm. But I like that with Bo-Katan is very different than everybody else we've seen in Mandalorian so far in Book of Boba Fett.
So, sorry, I want to go to JJ. JJ Skywalker says the Alamites reminded him of the Rakghouls from KOTOR. Yeah, it's Rakghouls. There's an L there, but I'm sure it's just a typo. But yeah, very similar. In fact, there's a whole, if you play SWTOR, not to bring that up, but hey, why not since we're here? There's an entire like storyline around the Rakghoul invasion and the disease and all of that. And it's kind of the same vibes. They're kind of like these scary cave dwelling creatures that, you know, are infectious and all that. I think it was the closest that we got to like probably zombies at one point, because people can be infected and you can have that Rakghoul disease. So, okay, but I digress. So thank you, man. I appreciate anytime somebody comes in with the KOTOR references. I'm just going to end the show right there. We'll pick up the rest here on the next episode.
Don't do that.
So yeah. Okay. So, yeah, this is where she stabs it, and this is where we get the little scampering off of the head. That's super creepy. Jumps in the mech. She dispatches that mech without a problem. Like, I love that shot of her like scraping the underbelly,
sliding under it.
The carriage or whatever it was with the Darksaber. Super Jedi-like in terms of like how she was wielding it. So I mean, it's very clear that she has some kind of connection to the Darksaber because she's able to wield it without the weight of it impacting her. But at the same time, she's had it long enough, either through her own training or whatever else she's had, that she's pretty, she's got a lot of prowess when it comes to wielding this thing. So that's good.
She really does. Yeah. It was really cool. I mean, yeah, you're right. She was just such a natural, and it was just like watching a Jedi with a lightsaber.
Yep.
Just very, very competent with it, and just very almost elegant in some ways with it too.
Yep. So, okay. So Din finally awakens after all of this, he's getting blood sucked out or plasma donation, whatever it was he was doing. She mentions, "I saved your life." I'm not going to say there's a life debt here, right? And some people were talking about that. Grogu saved his life. And I know this is you can put the tinfoil hat theory on, or tinfoil hat on if you want. But I mean, she did save his life. And the last person that saved his life was Grogu, and Grogu was allowed to come into the clan. Any thoughts or any chance she's now part of the clan? Are they going to make that offer? Or do you think it's like, that's so above her, like we talked about earlier? Because I guess that's where my head's really at. I don't think.
Well, but remember with Grogu was a little bit different because his was more of a foundling, right? His is more of a young child being found, and them again having some sort of bond or connection that was otherworldly. It was unexpected. Yeah, he saved his life, but I think that had a whole different scale to it, and a very different type of interaction between the two characters. I think with Bo-Katan, I mean, yeah, they could I mean, if you ship them, then yeah, they'll unite the clans at some point, if you know what I mean. So I mean,
Right,
but I mean,
yeah.
but
It's
again,
different kind of clan. Yeah, different
right,
context there.
right. But she saved his life. I mean, Grogu and him are a team, right? I mean, they're a clan. They're expected to have each other's backs. So they're having a quote unquote a life debt to Grogu would be kind of a little bit silly because they already have each other's backs. They already do everything and will sacrifice anything for one another, right? In theory, at least. Or we haven't. Well, yeah, presumably they would. But again, that Bo-Katan went there with the specific intent of checking on Din and then, eventually saving his life. Yeah, and he admits that, and there's no shame in that. I mean, he embraces it. He's like, I owe you. You came back for me. He knows that she didn't have to. Knows that she probably didn't want to on some levels, and so that she did. Yeah, I mean, it's a debt of gratitude, and he definitely knows that he needs to make good on that. Now, granted, they've kind of like with Sid and the Bad Batch, right? They have these trade offs. They've done things for one another, so trying to keep score and all of that seems a bit unnecessary at this point. You just, hey, yeah, when you need something, you can always count that I'll be there, right? You don't have to. It's not a life debt or anything. It's just we just have a connection. We respect one another. This is the way. This is what we do, right? And this is like when she was telling the story to him about her father, and the sacrifice he made for Mandalore. It's the same type of idea, right? He stops and pays respects, and she looks at him in a slightly different way. And again, those are the things that bring them together. And those are the things that make them respect one another, that they are willing to go above and beyond and cast away some of the differences of the child of the watch versus these delinquents that were living on Mandalore, from their perspective. So I like that they just believe in one another. And I think that's what they know they need to do differently in the future. So I like that we're seeing some of that now. And these two characters can exemplify that, coming from this place of privilege with the royal family, as well as these cast-asides of the children of the watch.
Yeah. The only thing I take away from that is they have the hots for each other. So I'm glad that we're on the same page there. So
wait, so who do you know? Wait, hold on. Do
okay,
you think
so
she has the hots for him, or he has the hots for her, or because I mean he's got O'Mara on the sideline now.
Well, yes. So Lauren and I were talking about this earlier.
I've already lost interest.
Yeah, so I think she's you can go ahead and leave, and I'll just continue on here, and I'll call you back in a minute. So I think, and here he goes, he's leaving. I think I'd like to ship them first off. Second, O'Mara, I think, is going to have something to say about this, because I think she's like this is not going to be cool with her, and she's fully capable of taking care of herself. I think what's going to happen is he's definitely going to grow from the relationship with somebody as this power couple that they are now. I think that's going to be good for him, and so that when O'Mara finally comes back into the picture, he's a more complete person for her. And vice versa. So I think this is all good things. I think this is all kind of working according to the will of the Force. And I'm looking forward to it.
Still going to be awkward if he's not taking that helmet off.
Yeah, that's very true. Still going to say. So getting back on track, because we just lost like 10 viewers. Getting back on track, I do think that, I'm with you. Like, I don't think there's a life debt here by any means. But at the same time, if they do want to play up the fact that she doesn't have anybody and like she's, down and out, and he's like, well, hey, you could join us. It's just me and this dude. But if you want to be a part of it, that leans into this whole idea of him building ranks and building people from the ground up. Lauren says, that's not what I was saying when we spoke earlier, Albert. My take is a little bit different than yours. I don't know what to tell you there. So I'm going to just take that off the screen. So the other thing here was Din, when she's going through, so Bo-Katan is kind of talking about all the sorrows that she has at this point, right? As he's kind of laying there recovering, she says that, nothing here was nothing here but a curse is left. She said it was a great society. Now it's only a memory. I once ruled here. Now it's destroyed. Nothing to cling to but ashes. I'm like, my goodness, this girl is like really like just down and out. But I mean, it's all understandable, right? Getting to see all this for the first time for her. Yeah.
Yeah. Look around. I mean, it's just, in some ways it's her just accepting reality and trying to get over what it was and what she's lost and what those memories were. And that the trauma of seeing this once beautiful place that really that was home. It was Mecca for a civilization and a culture, given their difference. it was still something really special. And to see it like it is now just feels like it's just a bad dream. Like there's just no way this, I mean, it's still sinking in that this is reality, I think.
Yeah.
And so that she responds these ways to me seem natural. I mean, these are natural human responses to it of coping effectively.
Yeah. You mentioned this earlier, and there's this moment here where she talks about it when he says, you know, he's like giving her words of affirmation and saying that, hey, you were right. You know, Mandalore is not cursed. And she's almost like, she kind of turns it on him and is like, was I? You know, are you really, you know, is it really not cursed? Because look around you, buddy. It's definitely a curse. Like there's nothing here. And she truly believes that. Now, I think there is that major moment at the very end that kind of like shakes her foundation. But yeah, at this time, yeah, she's not really believing in those words. Like that place is definitely cursed from her perspective.
It's hard to argue. I mean, when you just look around and see where it's at least where they know right now, that in a few minutes, things will turn on its head.
Things will change a little bit. Yeah. The whole Pog Soup comment was interesting, where she says, can you appreciate the irony? The fact that he's on a home planet, or he's on the home world. He's never been, really been part of the Mandalorian culture.
Right.
And what are you doing? What are you counting?
I'm counting all the things you're going to show that were ironic about the Children of the Watch and their, like the way that they're so steeped in the lore, yet they've never been, like, he's never been to Mandalore. Mm-hmm. He's never had a Mandalorian like comfort food effectively. Everybody has, right? I mean, you could probably count on more than one hand all the things that he's not experienced that they hold as dear to them of this is what it means to be Mandalore, when it's some of these subtleties of the cultural aspect of it that he has zero context or idea that even exist. Mm-hmm. And it's really weird that Pog Soup or something like that wouldn't be just part of everyone. You know, everybody's had it. It just seems weird to me.
Yeah,
because even cultures that are spread around seem to have some common thread between them, right?
Yeah. I'm that same way with like Vienna sausages. Like I can't believe most people have never had Vienna sausages, even though that is kind of a staple of growing up here in America and eating, right? Potted meat. What do you mean you've never had potted meat? Right? The same analogy.
I don't know anybody that hasn't cracked open a can of a quarter-length sausages, and water.
Yeah. How un-American of you folks if you've never done that for anybody that is American.
Why don't you like America?
No, okay, so seriously, we get back. She talks about the children's stories. I love that she said that's adorable, that he keeps believing, these fairy tales.
See, and that's when I knew the shipping was going to start with you people. Yes, you people.
Because she said the adorable.
Yeah. Oh, you're so adorable with your cute stories and no, stop it, people.
Sorry, I'm going to go. I think people have finally caught up with us because remember, there's the delay on what we see versus what you're reading and et cetera, vice versa, right? But it looks like we're getting some feedback on the Vienna sausages comments. There's an emoji that looks like it's about to throw up. Dale says some parts are meat, talking about spam. So here's Jeff saying, you've never had Pog Soup. Have you at least played Pogs? Bo-Katan in a deleted scene, probably. That's a 90s reference for anybody that's not familiar with if you remember what Pogs are. We're not going to get into it here.
Go Google it, yeah.
I had some Star Wars Pogs. I was a little old to play Pogs, I'll be fair and honest, but it was pretty cool to collect them. So, and then finally, my brother, Vindication. Bro, that's all we ate. Yeah, that's all we had. Yeah, Vienna sausages and potted meat.
Sometimes it's all you can afford for a while. My family has some stories too. Yeah, I get it. We had Vienna sausages actually fairly frequently.
Yep. Well, there go the other 10 viewers. So we're done here. There's nobody else watching the show. So we're going to end it there. But no, going back to the children's stories, talking about how cute it was. It was interesting though. Like she did not take the Darksaber. So good on her, right? She had an opportunity there when it was just laying there and he was passed out. She could have probably just took it and left. And she didn't, and that would have been a very villainous thing to do. That would have been a very antagonistic thing to do, but she did not do that. So that's good. I mean, and like it bodes well for what we said earlier about how she's not the villain of the series, and her heart is in the right place, even though she's struggling with this whole idea of like feeling like the rightful ruler, but not being the rightful ruler because of who owns it or rules it or wields a Darksaber, et cetera, et cetera. All that was. I'm not even gonna go to the chat because I don't know what's going on over there. But then we get, she talks about how this place is not magical, and we get the lines at this point from the trailer where Din Djarin is talking about without the creed, what are we? What do we stand for? Our people are scattered like stars in the galaxy. The creed is how we survive. And I think what they did is they removed the first line from the trailer, right? Without the creed. And then they removed the second line, the creed is how we survive. So we have the context now in which he was talking about this. And so it doesn't really fall in line with kind of our theory, right? Or at least mine of like, oh, he's rallying the troops and this is part of his like big speech that he's giving before they all kind of come together against some major cause. But I think the words aren't lost. I mean, there's a lot of significance in this especially in the context now of the creed itself.
I like it that, I mean, and I think to an extent it says something to her too, because the words of it are just they're just broad. They can apply to anything, like to either part of the clan, any way of how they view things, right? It was like, these are the words that we live by, because Bo-Katan and them, to an extent, have the same type of mentality. It might not be tied to the creed specifically, but it's these tenets, it's these ideas that this is what it means to be in our culture. This is what it means to believe in our family. This is what it means to believe in our people, our way of life.
Right.
And if we don't have that, if we can't unite behind all of that, if we can't all, fly that common banner when we need to, then what's the point in any of it? It's exactly what Bo is trying to do, right? And I think in that moment, it might finally start triggering for her what he's saying and how, yes, there might be a path forward here. At least it asks the question in her head, I think. Is there a path forward for us to do something different than we've done? Is uniting the clans at the forefront of her mind and saying that she can work with a child of the Watch or the children of the Watch in particular? I'm not saying that whatsoever, because I think in this moment, that's still those issues run really deep, right? They run really deep. But at least in that moment, yes, there is a different way of thinking that she is at least contemplating and thinking about that is possible. There might be a way. Have I been doing have I been doing everything I can do in order to heed those same ideals, and put our people truly first, or am I putting myself first? And so I think some of those thoughts are going through her head in this moment.
Mm-hmm. So I think a little bit later, when she's talking about, she took the creed, right? She talks about the Mandalorian tenets. Do you think we're going to get into that? Like, I would love, it feels like it'd be appropriate at this point since they're kind of talking about it. But do you think we're explicitly going to have somebody talk about what the creed says, or, old or new, modified or unmodified, what the Mandalorian tenets are? And I think in Legends, we have all this stuff, and I was going to put it in the show notes, but we may turn it into a Patreon episode at this point, because I do have a feeling like they would. And if they don't, at least it would be kind of interesting in context with regards to what they're talking about here. But any chance we'll get into that, given where we are right now in the storyline?
I would like it, but at the same time, we've gone through a couple of seasons now, plus, and we've still not really had them go any deeper, any further into what some of that is. We get a little bit of the creed, right, with the ritual and the rite and the baptism and the ceremonial aspect of it. But when we get into the actual tenets, when we get into the deeper, I don't know, almost like the mythology of the Jedi code, right? Or the Sith code. When we get that level of detail, it's hard to say yes, just because we rarely get to that level of detail in TV and in movies.
Screen. Yeah.
On screen in general, right? That really is limited more, unfortunately, to the books and that type of material, because they can take the time to really talk about it in not only in an individual first person way, but in a very third person type of perspective too. I would love for them to do this though. I think that would be fantastic if they were able to do it, but the history hasn't been there for them to do it. I think there's opportunity though, at the very least.
No, I like that. I'm with you there. The precedence has not been set. We never have gotten into the Jedi code or the code of the Sith. Never seen that from a canon perspective. They've talked about it in roundabout ways and maybe have given us kind of, a different take on some of the verbiage, but nothing literal. I think if they're going to do it, this may be the right opportunity to do so, because they are kind of talking about very staple, foundational things of what it means to be a Mandalore. And so, I mean, there might be a way to kind of work some of this in. I don't think someone's going to read it off, right? But I think it would be good, because I do feel like they are putting emphasis on the creed itself, and whether they adopt it as is, or at some point they modify it or update it to kind of fit this new age of Mandalore that's been prophesized, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. I think it would be a way to kind of set the ground rules, right? Maybe explicitly on the nose for the audience to kind of say, okay, here's what new Mandalorians live by, and this is what this new age is going to be defined by. So it's just interesting that they brought up the tenets themselves, because it's just like kind of a throwaway line, but there's a lot implied in those things that we never really get to see or read about.
Right.
Okay, so she offers like, hey, I'll just take you to the waters, and she almost says it very flippant, like it's such a joke, right? I'll take you there. I mean, you're not going to find it yourself, and you'll see. Like, there's really not here. She said, don't thank me until you see them, right? She said it almost sarcastically, like, you're going to be very disappointed when we get there. Trust me.
Yeah, it's just a pool, right? I mean,
It's just
and
a pool
again,
of water.
and again, and that's why I like so much that we got her perspective on why does she feel that way, is because it was this just ceremonial thing. It really didn't feel like it had any kind of importance. It was just a rite of passage. And while rites of passage are important, this was for everyone else, but really meant very little to the people involved. And again, maybe it meant something to her dad. Her dad, she said, was very proud, but it almost seemed like, while she respects her father, obviously, but it seemed like there was some other rub there too, of maybe not what she wanted. And again, the mantle of princess was thrust upon her. It's not by choice, right? It's by birthright, and the pressures that go with it, and that she had to train for this entire life. And there's a certain resentment to it, I think, in some kind of ways too. And I think it seemed like that came forward. Did you get that same impression that there was just, I mean, not even really implied, it really did feel like the resentment was coming out in some capacity? It didn't really make sense given her story and her history, but did that come through for you as well?
Yeah, no, it did. It did. Like, it felt like there was something there. It could have just been teen angst or rebellion of some sort, but something had to push her to the point where she rebelled against her sister, which I think is an extension of her father too. As much as she loved her father, and now maybe in years later is looking back and reflecting about just how wonderful and amazing he really was, where at the time she may not have seen that because she was in a different mindset. I definitely got that impression from her, and I think, again, this is where I feel like her character is continuing to develop and become a very complex character, more so than we've had in a very long time with Bo-Katan. She was just kind of on the surface, so really cool and excited to kind of see where that goes.
But again, she views some of this stuff as a fairy tale, right? Of children's stories. Reading this pillar, I mean, she views it like she's just reading a story that's been passed down for ages, right? It's just, here's a family, here's a little golden book that Albert was read to him by his great grandmother or something. It was the same type of idea behind it, rather than taking it seriously or embracing that cultural aspect of it.
I just wonder how much her father was like Mando, right? Or like of that group. Was he that? Maybe he was an stout religious person that really believed all that, and he might have been the only one in the family, and everybody else is kind of like, yeah, he's just got a really strong faith, but we don't really believe all that stuff. And so, yeah, that could have been part of the rebellion itself for her. Who knows?
Well, and again, when your family is, I mean, from her perspective, the family is basically its heritage, or its legacy is loss in so many different ways. Her dad dying for Mandalore, her sister dying for Mandalore, she feeling personally responsible for losing Mandalore in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's her family legacy is lost, right? So this is about redemption as much as anything for Bo-Katan as well. That, of course, that opportunity to her has been lost as well.
Yep. They continue to kind of talk about some of the things that we've already discussed, really about the being neutralized. She talks about the Empire's punishment. I think we're speculating that they did that so that there would be no threat from the Mandalorians and any chance of them uprising in this new state of power that they had just accumulated. But she acknowledges again that it made them weak, made them vulnerable. This is why they were to kind of come in and smash them, as she says. The fist of the Empire smashed them. They finally make their way to the mines of Mandalore, which I always hear, like, Lauren will like this than anybody else, like the mines of Moria, like from Lord of the Rings. I don't know if there's any significance there, but that always comes in my head. They find the entrance nonetheless. It's like this narrow entrance with like this slit there. And then they go to the living waters, and Bo-Katan talks about this is where she, visited as a child. She recounts about what we talked about earlier about the creed, and that she was subjected with all kinds of gifts and royalty. It was very ceremonial. in nature, but really nothing else, at least from her perspective, nothing else behind any of this stuff. Like, this is all just, like I said, pomp and circumstance. It was, tradition to do these things. They were just going through the motions because that was what's expected of them, because of a legacy of culture and just, habits or whatever it is. So, she does talk about her father. Bo-Katan hits her in the heartstrings at this point because he says, your father sounds like a very interesting man. He says the famous words that I think a lot of people love to hear about people they love, is like, I really wish I would have liked to known him, and she says he was a great man, which reminded me of Luke talking about Ben, saying Ben was a great man, but I don't know if that was intentional or not. Mentions that he died defending Mandalore. And then, like you said earlier, he does a very reverent, respectful thing, and probably the only way he knows how. And by saying this is the way, it almost sounds like he's choking up when he says it, which I thought was amazing for him to do, because you can almost see it on his face, even though he's under the helmet. But I think that really hit Bo-Katan super hard because, one, I think she believes that he's being very, very sincere in saying, I wish I would have known him, and he is such a great man. Somebody's validating her own feelings about her father, right? There's something deeply rooted there for her that hits her. But then on top of that, knowing what she knows about Din Djarin and what those words mean, they don't use those words very lightly, right? And so for him to kind of say that to her, I think it really hits her. And I think that's why at the very, when he walks away and she's looking over at Grogu and she's like, what are you looking at? Again, another line from Star Wars, because Han Solo does his exact words in, I forget, Empire, I think, or whatever it is. Or no, is it the very end of
he said, He says, what are you laughing at?
What are you laughing at? I thought it was, he said, I know what I'm doing. That's the line I was thinking of. But either way, I don't want to get, I want to get back to the question. So I think for her, when he walks away and she says, what are you looking at? I want your thoughts on that, because I guess you could see it a couple different ways. Whether like Grogu was seeing her kind of with her defenses down because she was vulnerable at the point, or did she hold her look too long on Mando as he was walking away and got caught? What do you think?
Wow. I'm not gonna touch on that second one.
Okay.
I think some of it was the realization yet again that a child of the Watch can respect what my father did or what my family has done. And not so much that it was Din Djarin specifically. I think some of this is almost expected, from him as a person based on what she's seen, at least to this point. But I think also not only that someone took a moment in that right there and noticed the emotion feel of it and stopped to pay respect in a very personal and direct way. But again, what Din Djarin represents to Bo-Katan with his people, and that someone was able to actually, one of his type would be able to stop and pause and pay respects and say, this is the way. Like, this is the way that we protect Mandalore. We all should have the same, again, common principle, the same common goal, the same commonality in general. Yeah. That we all want to achieve the same thing. We want to protect our culture, that someone else believes in the things that she does. And so when that longing look lingers a little too long and Grogu busts her, I will give you this one moment. Live it up, Albert.
Laugh it up, Fuzzball.
It was just that shock and awe of sorts, to where it's like, wow, like kind of rethinking everything I know about this person, about everything that's gone wrong. And there is something special about this individual in front of me. Now, whether that's romantic or interest or whatever that might be, but it's the recognition that this person continues to be very consistent in this regard and continues to do all of the things that I think that she would find attractive in both a partner from a romantic standpoint or from a relationship and future and family and all of clan and all of that, but also from a more of a business partner and a warrior partner and someone that she can trust, and that she would be able to have her back and not feel like she's always looking over her shoulder because the rest of these people have abandoned her. Mm-hmm. And so again, in a very non-romantic way, but in a very, cultural and clan type of way, non-romantic clan, not forming your own clan, not uniting your clans. God, Albert, get your mind out of the gutter. God.
Yeah,
Quit looking at me like that.
Yeah, like you're crawling your way out of this. I can see it happening.
I know. I have like
in real
I
time.
have this picture. It's like you, Steph, and Lauren are all right in front of me, just like, yeah, just looking at me like you're buying into this. We've got to.
Yeah. Well, I think,
but it's all there. I mean, I just like
Yeah.
that she has this moment of vulnerability, right? And Grogu
Right.
kind of busts her, and Grogu is so innocent and cute and disarming in that kind of way, and that he busts her, and that she knows she's totally busted. That it is absolutely perfect in that regard.
yeah, she's caught in the moment, and she's caught off guard, and she's caught with her guard down, and there is a connection there that I think that's what they were trying to show, is that either way, and all joking aside, however you want to look at it, there's definitely a connection there that did not exist before, and it could be a number of things, but that was that discussion that this is the way, in reverence to her father who she loved, was enough for her to kind of finally open up to Din Djarin, which I think is going to start playing out. Like, I think she's going to look at him very differently. However you want to look at it, she's going to look at him differently from this point on. From the storyline perspective of bringing Mandalore together on that purpose alone, this bodes well. Like, they needed this in their relationship, because up until now, she's had that very pretentious kind of snotty attitude towards him, right? And I think that's all changed at this point. It's changed forever at this point. So this is a good thing for their character development and their relationship going forward.
Yeah, which means they're probably related.
Well, sorry, Mike. Yeah, that's probably the case, which would be the very George Lucas to do something like that. Okay, so they get to the living waters. You know, she dismisses the idea of it really being anything. It's like, here it is. Here's this big pool of muddy water that you were so, destined to see. She gives them the tour. She talks about the plaque. Oh, so I want to talk about the plaque real quick. It says, these mines date back to the age of the first Mandalore. According to the ancient folklore, the mines were once a mythosaur lair. So not the mythosaur, but a mythosaur. So confirmation that there were several. Mandalore the Great, who is a character in Legends, which we're going to talk about because we're way over on time tonight. But there is a character called Mandalore the Great, is said to have tamed the mythical beast. It is from these legends, and I laughed at that. I was like, legends again. So it is from these legends that the skull signet was adopted and became the symbol of our planet. So this is all kind of, for anybody that's not up to speed on what is that symbol they keep showing or what's the significance of it, they've given it to you here on a platter, on a plaque, front and center. You kind of know where this is coming from at this point.
Now, didn't the Mandalorians drive the mythosaurs to extinction in Legends as well?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they drove everybody.
I love the irony of this of the Mandalorian culture in general.
Right. Yeah. They could change a lot of that though too. I mean, it's kind of wide open for them, honestly.
Oh, it really is. Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, so he removed, and then like without any hesitation, he just starts like taking his clothes off. Well, okay, let me back up. I don't want to get.
He's completely zoned everything else out. Like,
exactly, that's what I meant. Like he's in a zone. Yeah.
Yeah. He's in that mode. He's like, okay, it's time to I'm here. This is his own little ceremony, right?
Right. He's taking it very seriously. He removes everything except his helmet, which turns into a problem.
On, got his clothes on.
Oh yeah, he still has his clothes on, right? We didn't get that moment that we talked about maybe
blaster,
happening.
Blaster, Darksaber, jetpack, cape. I think those are the major things that he removes. Yeah.
Yeah. It was similar to like your weapons, you won't need them, right? Luke going into the cave kind of thing, taking everything off, although Luke was smart enough to put his lightsaber back on or take his lightsaber with him. But no, this guy's,
that
more
is why
willing.
He failed.
Well, did he really though?
All right, stop.
Okay, so he jumps into the water, or he starts walking into the water. I swear by my name and the names of the ancestors that I shall walk the way of the Mandalore, and the words of the creed shall be forever in my heart. And then he just descends into the water. I know there was some chatter going on here in our live chat about what happened.
Right.
I think it's meant to be ambiguous. Like, I don't know that they'll ever come back and answer that, because I think that leaves in my head. I love the mystique of all of this. Right? It could be a very pragmatic kind of answer or explanation, practical explanation of, there used to be more there, and suddenly because of a sinkhole or the destruction that was going on, now there's nothing. It just falls, 1,000 feet deep, and that was never the case before, right? That could be one explanation. I saw some folks in there talking about, well, maybe it's the mythosaur that pulled him down into the waters, into the depths, right? Whatever it is. I love the fact that they did not give us the answer to that. And because it is very, the fact that he fell that far, and now granted, like, the unsinkable Mandalorian is your title tonight, right? He had his helmet on still, and there may have been other pieces on there. So
when he had his armor, yeah. So I mean, that he would
okay,
sink is kind
right,
of where I sat with it, yeah.
and no jetpack, so he's
Right.
going to sink like a lead weight to the very bottom. But
Exactly.
the descent at which he did, as far down as he did, because it did sound like he went down pretty quick, very far. That leaves something to the imagination in terms of like what really happened. Was it a current? Was it the will of the Force or some other kind of, predestined spiritual thing that had to happen for him to kind of go down there? I mean, there's a lot of symbolism.
For good TV. I don't know.
Well, yeah, true. There's a lot of good symbolism in him kind of falling in that regard and then being risen back up and, coming out. I mean, this is kind of almost a baptism of sorts. You could talk about the rebirth of his character in some ways, very similar to like Bo-Katan, I guess, at the very end. Both of them, really, if you think about it, they're coming out as different people. Who they are going into the water and who they come out to is very different in this episode. But do you care, I guess, or if we never get the explanation as to why he get so far down so fast in the water there?
No, I think he just sank. And again, I think it just makes for good TV. We know that he was going to sink before because when they were on the boat last season with when all the pirates, I guess it was Book of Boba Fett, but with all the pirates and they trap him in the cage with the thing that ate Grogu. He was using his jetpack in order to surface up because he was drowning in that kind of way too. So again, there's precedence for him sinking. And like you said, the armor's heavy, so it doesn't float. But again, no, I think it's just made for, she needed to go down there. And again, you see the depths of this. I mean, the whole point is just to show you the depths. Like this is a cavernous underground area. So when it was the lair of a mythosaur, that is fact. I mean, and you can see it in fact. Not only is the chamber itself rather large, but there's this whole underwater area that just supports what's on the plaque and what's being discussed, between the characters. And again, it opens that opportunity of what else is down there, right? And to what Bo was saying before, like what else has survived? What don't we see lurking beneath the surfaces of things? And so that he's all the way down and found the very bottom. Yeah, was it really fast? Sure, cool, nope, but again, I'm not going to go. I don't know why a mythosaur would just go pluck and then just throw him to the bottom and then just kind of chill. It seems like it would have attacked him. And he wasn't making much of a stir to really do anything to stir the giant in the first place.
Right.
So I don't know how that would all... It seems like that would have been a bit much. And she had to go down a fair distance before the mythosaur was even there. So like the distance of where it was and when she came up, we're still... the thing was a bit further down, it seemed, at least. But anyway.
Well, either way, she jumps in, grabs him, eventually finds him. I think you had mentioned in the chat, I guess in the audio description, they talk about how she was following the trail of bubbles.
Yeah, although that doesn't really come across on screen, to be fair. Yeah. It doesn't look like that. Of course, then she shuts the light off and she starts looking for his light because he did have his headlamp on when he was going into the water, which was smart. And so she finds him. She's able to get down there. Now, granted, getting him just in position to be able to launch him, you can hear her kind of grunting because that's got to be tough. I mean, that's with as much pressure from that depth with water and the bulk of all of that. And he's a full grown man as well. So he's probably over 200 pounds, and so he's just that's a lot to do. That's a lot of force you got to get going before you even, hit the accelerator on the jetpack to be able to get up to the surface. Yeah. And then when she comes up and sees it, she's like, oh, boop.
Right. Yeah. Well, the scale was perfect. Like, we've never seen one on screen. I'm trying to think when we've actually seen mythosaurs. There were some comics where they were in. I didn't get a chance to go back and look to see what else. I mean, sure there is. There's plenty, probably other stuff in Legends.
I think they were very stylized drawings in Clone Wars, like with some of the history of the Darksaber and that kind of thing. But they were very cartoonized and maybe black and white or something like that. They weren't really detailed. So first time really seeing, just seeing the huge horn come across, it was amazing to see just this profile start to emerge.
Yeah, and it's very, like, they did a good job of keeping true to the signet, right? I mean, we're all very familiar. Like, I was worried that if they were going to show this thing, they were going to give it a lot of external, like, flesh pieces and stuff, that would make it unrecognizable. But it looks like they stuck pretty similar to the skull and used that as its basis. So I'm pretty excited about that. I do wonder what that mythosaur was thinking the significance of it, right? It's foreshadowing in a lot of ways. This goes back to what the armorer was talking about in season 2 about, what was it? I wrote that down here at the very beginning, but the songs of eons foretold the mythosaur rising up to herald a new age of Mandalore. Right. And so, we got that in season 2. We talked about it then that we would probably get this. So I think we're right on, at least we were right on that regard. And guys, it's not that hard. I mean, just put yourself in Jon Favreau's shoes as a writer and think about like, what would be the most obvious, fun, over the top thing that we could put in Star Wars? Mythosaur coming to life? Check. Right. I mean, it was going to happen. I mean,
bring back a Rancor. Check.
All
right. Mandalorian. Oh, Mythosaur. Yeah.
Mythosaur. Yep. We're getting that back in here.
Yeah,
so, I mean,
sense. But again, this is what I was going before too. Does this diminish the value and the significance of the Darksaber to you? Or are they very different, or do they go hand in hand? Or it seems like the Mythosaur is something that, again, this is something that has not been seen in 1,000 years or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
So does that diminish that value of the Darksaber, or of the significance of it? Do you need the Darksaber if you're riding a Mythosaur?
Well, I think you do, because if we're talking about how do you bring these different groups together that have different beliefs and backgrounds, if you have the Darksaber, you're winning over the power hungry people that follow the Darksaber, right? Like all of Bo-Katan's clan and everybody else. If you're holding the Darksaber and riding a Mythosaur, now you're bringing in the zealots, like Children of the Watch, right? Because they're looking at that, and I think I'm probably oversimplifying that. It's probably super gratuitous in terms of like, fan, what do you call it? In terms of fan service, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like how egregious can you be of having like somebody like Din Djarin in full Mandalore armor on the end of, at some point in the season or at the very end of the season, holding the Darksaber, holding it above his head, standing on a Mythosaur, rearing that thing back up. I mean, it's just like, you can almost see it happening. You probably know it's going to happen, and it's so in your face. But if you think about it, from a very simple storytelling perspective, it would be like, oh my gosh, all these clans would be like, wow, it's not just one theory, or it's not one prophecy coming true. All of them, there's something here. Let's fall in line with this person. And it doesn't have to be Din Djarin. It can be somebody else too.
Right. And so here's a question I have for you, because I don't know this timeline as well as you do, especially with Old Republic and the history of the Jedi and the Mandalorians, all of that. Was the Darksaber created after the Mythosaurs disappeared, to where this is almost like a replacement for for a Mythosaur, or a replacement symbol of sorts for the Mandalorian people to rally around, since the Mythosaurs were extinct? Did that happen way later, or am I mixed up in some of that? I was just thinking about that. Like, why did we create the Darksaber? I mean, granted, the Jedi and I get all that part of it, Tar Vizsla,
sure.
But was that also to replace the symbol of the Mythosaur in some kind of way? The more I thought about it, I was like, I wonder if there's some semblance there.
They're both old as dirt. Okay, I can say that, right? In terms of which came first, I want to say the Mythosaur came first, because those were native to the planet when they settled in on that planet, because they weren't originally from Mandalore, right? They came there. Right. And they went through a whole process of like the locals and getting rid of the people there or whatever, bringing them on board. The Mandalore was one of the ones that brought all these nomadic tribes together, and they all became that, right? And so the Mythosaurs were already there for a very long time. Now, how many years transpired from the Mythosaur to the Darksaber is thousands of years, but it's so far in the past still. Like there was thousands of years that happened between those two times. But the coming of the Darksaber was even thousands of years from our current timeline as well.
Okay.
So I don't know that they've really, honestly, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody's really gone back and, put pinpoints in some of that stuff and said, here's what happened in between that stuff. We just know all of this stuff happened for a very long time. So to answer your question, whether it replaced a symbol of the Mythosaur, I don't think it did. I don't think the Mythosaurs were around, though, when the Darksaber came to power. So it may have been just another way for people to kind of rally around the Mandalore and kind of come together, which is probably something they needed at that point. Because when they first started, they were all hunky-dory, right? And then they started having, going their ways, and civil war broke out for thousands of years. And it wasn't until Vizsla came around and reunited all of them, and they had thousands of years of peace and prosperity for whatever reason, and then it all went to hell again.
So let me ask you a question. So this is what everybody really wants to know. Do you feel like that Din Djarin is purified and cleansed of the living waters. He didn't really finish the creed, or he didn't finish the
Sentence.
recite. He didn't recite everything, because we even know the kid in episode 1 or in chapter 17 didn't finish it either, because it was interrupted by another prehistoric type of creature. But in your opinion, do you feel like he has atoned for his sins at this point? He's bathed in the waters. He said most of it. Is that enough?
So I think from his perspective, yes. I think from Bo-Katan's perspective, yes. I have a feeling, though, when they get back to old, the rule follower, the armorer, I don't know that she's going to be okay with that. Like, it almost felt like,
how are they going to prove that he bathed in the waters? Anyway?
That's what I said earlier. Remember, we talked about this in the last episode. It's
right.
Like, okay, how are you going to prove that? And I said, well, maybe Bo-Katan's there and she can vouch for him. But you had a good point. It's like, what worth is her word to her, to the armorer?
It'd be like, do you smell me? Do I smell like I haven't bathed in 1,000-year-old algae?
Right. You know what the mythosaur's been doing in these waters this entire time?
Yeah, there is no pump that is,
exactly
that is pumping that stuff out.
So yeah, I mean, like I think from in his mind, Bo-Katan's mind, sure, he's done everything he needs to, and maybe this becomes part of the narrative too, where he says he did it. The armored's like, nope, sorry, you didn't go through the ritual, or you didn't. She may ask specific questions. Did you get to the end? Did you do this? There may be more to it, and he's like, no, I didn't get a chance to because of the mythosaur or whatever. And she's like, well, no, sorry, you didn't pass, kind of thing. I think that could be a good challenge for him to kind of yet another obstacle for him to overcome with her in order to get her on board. And if she doesn't, then maybe, I didn't like this idea, but maybe she does become kind of like an antagonistic character, right? Bucking up against him and not liking this, how everybody else is coming around but us, and we're still the sticks in the mud. I don't know. I could maybe get on board with that at that point.
Right. And then Dante kind of beat me to it in the chat, though. How long until he says, you know what? Come with me. Let me show you. And they have to actually kind of put up or shut up and go out there with him to be able to see for themselves that this place exists, and maybe perhaps see the mythosaur as well. I don't know that part. I'm curious how he's going to play that angle. And I don't know that Din saw the mythosaur, though. We know Bo-Katan did, clearly.
I don't think he did.
I don't think he did either. I think he was probably fading in and out at best, if not a bit unconscious. Now, when he comes out, I think he's coughing. But again, he's just trying to not die and probably on the verge of blacking out. So his brain's probably a bit fuzzy in that regard. But
well, here's another question.
I want to hear what this conversation is afterwards. Like,
well,
did you see this?
I have a question. Does she even say anything?
Yeah, that's another point.
What if she doesn't? What if she doesn't even tell him? Doesn't even mention the fact that they saw the mythosaur? Because that was really, she didn't believe in it, right? And now she saw it firsthand. And maybe it could be one of these things like, I don't know what I saw, right? There's probably a part of her mind that thinks, okay, there really was a mythosaur, but how could there really be? Because it's just a legend. It's just a myth. It's even in the freaking name. But she could just be like, doesn't say anything. And I don't know, again, I haven't really thought this through. Like, why would she withhold this information? But I think it does. It's probably unsettling to her, again, to kind of go back to what I kicked off at the very beginning of the episode, is like, this is kind of shaking her foundation and what she believes. And I don't know if she's going to be exactly comfortable with that. So does it come up later? Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's going to ride that freaking beast at some point. I mean, it's going to happen. Right. So how we get there, I don't know. Maybe she uses that or withholds that evidence or something until a little bit later, and then says, no, really, dude, there was one down there. You need to go back in the waters and bring it back out because we need you, whatever it is. That may be the case. But yeah, I don't know that she's going to tell him, and I don't think she has a really reason to tell him, because really he wasn't there for any other reason than to get in the waters and be cleansed and be on his way.
Right. Now, the other question that is permeating a lot of people's minds is has Bo-Katan now been cleansed, since she has technically bathed in the waters, although did not recite anything and did not do it with the intentions of being purified? But is she purified by just diving in after him? Yeah,
I think so. I think it's more, it's more symbolic, more spiritual, personal spirituality for her than, in the eyes of, Children of the Watch or anybody else. I don't think that really matters to her.
But can you accidentally be atoned? It's like if you were going to go get, this isn't meant to be sacrilegious or blasphemous to anyone. I apologize if it comes across this way. But if you were to go up to a baptism and sprinkle water on yourself, or something, that doesn't exactly meet the criteria of being
Right.
baptized,
Yeah, there's got to be something behind it, right? So no, I don't think she's looking at it as though baptism, like, but I think
I
symbolically.
I didn't know if the armorer might view it that way in your
Uh,
in your eyes.
I think you're right. I really don't think she gives two craps about Bo-Katan. I think they just hate each other right now. Hopefully they come around, because I think they'd be really cool fighting. I think we were theorizing or fanboying about, it'd be really cool to see them in battle together, right? Given how they fight and the different fighting techniques and styles they use.
Right.
So
I mean, and the armor is legit, man. She's going after a giant ass crocodile with, blacksmithing tools. So
right, right, yeah, she's pretty hardcore. But I think either way, I think this is the start of whatever this new age of Mandalore is, and that the new age of Mandalore is so, like, those words alone they can mean a lot of different things, but a lot of big things in the storytelling aspects of Star Wars where we are on the timeline, right? So this opens up the possibilities for a lot to happen. Um, Dave Filoni, again, before episode 1 or the first episode of this season came out, was on the press tour talking about how there was a lot of time that they had to play with, although I think it's like 40 years or whatever it is, whatever the timeline is, that there was a lot of time for them to kind of tell these big epic stories and still not impede on the events that happen in The Last Jedi and the rise of the Resistance. So I think that was his way of saying that, look, just because we're playing in this space in between these major events that are kind of bookcased by 2 trilogies doesn't mean that we can't still tell really big, grand stories and not have people reference them, or we don't have to go back and retcon the fact that Luke Skywalker doesn't ever mention that there was potentially a massive battle on Mandalore, or an uprising of the Mandalorians, or he fought with the Mandalorians at some point to overthrow the Empire, the remnants of the Empire. Again, I'm just theorizing things here, but it doesn't preclude them from doing those sorts of things. So I love the fact that they've got a lot of runway here to kind of play with and kind of tell these larger cinematic stories that we want to see in television, and not have to feel like they're confined or shackled to the trilogy that's going to come here, span of, again, years or something.
Yeah, and it's interesting with with Jon Favreau. He's gone on record as saying, if there's a story, I'd love to be doing Mandalorian for 5, 6, 7, 8 seasons. It not stopping at any time soon. Just to give additional backing to what you're saying. He's coming out on record and saying, like, if we've got a story, if there's this runway, if the ideas are coming and they make sense, like, we'd love to keep going this, because this is a lot of fun. Like, they're just really enjoying what they're doing and exploring and continuing to push this. And again, we know they're already writing another season, so there's an excitement behind it. And like you said, they seem to understand what paths they have open to them, and that none of this is going to go in step and rewrite anything or subvert anything, that, at least to anything. If it would be negligible or unimportant or just open to interpretation if it did.
Yeah. And don't, anybody that's still listening at this point, don't get too caught up in this, that comment too, because I think a lot of people are running with that and saying, oh, look, here we go. Star Wars really has no clue what they're doing. They're just making this up as they go along. There's no plan. That's not at all what he's saying. And I know it's so easy for the anti-Disneys, anti-Kathleen Kennedys, the fandom menace. These guys are just running with this headline, right? And that's not at all. I mean, they're completely taking this out of context. What they're saying is that they have a story that they want to tell. And so long as they continue to have that story in their minds, they'll continue to write it. So there's nothing ambiguous about that. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, we'll take this out 5, 7 years if we, as long as it feels good and it feels right. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of series, many television series and many movie series or franchises that have done this. And it's just a natural thing. A lot of them go bad. I get it. I understand where the concern is. But the one thing that's constant here, the one thing that I think at least that bodes well for this series in particular, is that you've got one primarily writer, right? Jon Favreau. So the analogy being George Lucas, right? Everything was wonderful, according to these folks, when George Lucas was, because we only had one person that was telling the story. Well, this is Favreau's story, right? And so as long as he's here and he's writing the stories, and you got Dave Filoni on his right shoulder telling him what to, what's right, what he can and can't do, then I think it's okay if they're kind of ambiguous about where they're going to go with the stories. Now, if that changes and suddenly we've got multiple directors and multiple different writers, and they're talking about, oh, this may go 10 seasons. We just don't know. Okay, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of concern there because that's never really bode well for a lot of television series, and more recently didn't really work out, in my opinion, with like the sequel trilogies. So there's not a lot of, there aren't any red flags here as far as I'm concerned yet.
Yeah, you still have that consistency, like you were saying,
exactly,
with Mandalorian. I think that's important. And again, they do have an idea of where these stories are going. They're not just doing a season at a time. I have a feeling their ideas are expanding beyond that. But do they go and flesh out all the ideas? No. But again, they're not looking to shoehorn a bunch of stuff in either for like a series of movies. And so I think they have a little bit more flexibility with some of that than what people in the movies are afforded to do, especially if you know you're doing a trilogy and going that route. I think with that, if you know you're doing a trilogy, you know you're doing 3 movies, you should probably have a rough sketch of what you want to cover in those 3 movies. Does it always happen that way? No, of course not. But then again, you usually have a similar writing team and everything else. So again, not apples to apples here. So I'm with you. We won't belabor any further, but yeah.
So where do we go from here?
That's a tough one, man. That's a really tough one. So, I mean, we know. I mean, we gotta have some sort of resolution to this conversation with Bo and Din, whether or not she's going to tell him, or they're going to talk that, hey, I saw this. Did you see it? No. Do they need to explore it, or where do they go next? I think it seems like he needs to go back to the armor and report back, at least that he feels like he's been atoned, if he does believe that.
Right. Yep.
And then potentially this news. But I could see where Bo-Katan would be very hesitant to let this get back to the Children of the Watch, because she doesn't know. Again, that distrust is still there. Even though she trusts Din, she doesn't necessarily trust them with that type of information about what they might do. Mm-hmm. So, but I think this is going to go and steer us back towards the rest of the Mandalorian crew of the Children of the Watch. But beyond that, I'm a bit at a loss as to what comes next. Do you have any ideas or thoughts there?
Well, a lot of it is just based on the trailers. Again, how do we get to Navarro? If they have been signaling that he is going to unify Mandalore, then the question that we spoke about last episode and even on the final hype episode is like, what is the threat? Sure, rebuilding Mandalore as is with an opposing threat. Okay, I guess that can be exciting, right? But it's way more exciting, and we'll be more vested in the story if there is some kind of larger threat that's preventing them, a blocker of sorts, right? Before they can do all of that. And earlier we were talking about the scene where Bo-Katan's flying around her gauntlet. Presumably it's her, but flying in the gauntlet, she's being chased by TIE fighters. And so we were saying maybe there is a large presence of the Empire still here. And that may be enough for them to kind of say, okay, we got to get rid of these guys because they pretty much set up shop here. And who knows what they're doing there. I mean, there could be a billion reasons why they're still there. Base of operations, we talked about Gideon, possibly. Maybe they're harvesting or mining or getting Beskar, right, wherever they can find it. There's still some kind of Beskar mill where they're still doing all that, stealing the weapons. This all may be going on, right? Kind of what Bo-Katan was talking about in season 2. So if that is a threat, then I think that at least explains why that would give him a reason to kind of rally the troops together, because he's not going to be able to take the Empire with like just 3 or 4 people, right? Or even 2 clans. He's going to have to pull everybody together and get them on board with the idea that this is our planet. Let's take it back. It's not poisoned. It's not cursed. I have the Darksaber. I'm right in a mythosaur. I mean, all that can kind of still play in. But how we get to Dr. Pershing and how we get to Moff Gideon, is there going to be Thrawn, Ahsoka, Paz Vizsla? What's where does he fit in all with this? I don't know.
Feels like a lot for 6 episodes, right?
That's exactly right. Like, I don't know how we squeeze all that into 6 episodes, but it doesn't seem like we're going to belabor going to the armorer and saying, I'm good, right? I think he's going to do that. And, I don't know that she's going to.
Maybe a different perspective. Do you think that we will continue the conflict between the Mandalorian clans, or do we think that will resolve itself relatively quickly then?
If they present a threat, a global threat, literally, then I think it'll get resolved pretty quickly. If not, then I think, they'll probably kind of tease that out until, the final 3 episodes or 2 or whatever that is.
Yeah, it feels like they can't tease it out too long. To your point, there's a lot of other things to cover. We know we got to go spend time with Dr. Pershing.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a part of an episode or maybe a full episode or something like that. But I'm with you. It seems like we've got to potentially resolve that relatively quickly if we're going to do that. But I still think that Din goes back to the armor pretty quickly, because this was his whole mission. This has been his whole. I guess he got to go to drop R5 off. I guess, I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
we're going back to
IG-11's got
testing.
to come back. They've already, maybe he doesn't, but I would think they would still go down that path too, of trying to bring him back.
It's
So,
possible, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, there's a lot here. I don't know. I'm kind of left at, I'm scratching my head, and maybe we'll cover this maybe that's the Patreon episode this week of like, where do we go from here? We can certainly toss around some ideas and theories. We can base a lot of it on the trailers and the footage that we saw. So that might be a good starting point. But yeah, I think it's pretty wide open. So I'm excited about some of the theories and speculation.
You know what, though, Albert? You were right about one thing.
What's that?
There were a lot here tonight. In our live stream tonight, we had a really great group of people, a lot of active chat. We want to invite everyone to come out, cantinacast.com/YouTube. If you were listening to us on the podcast, thank you for downloading it, by the way. But we'd like you to come out and join us on the live stream, like Miss Sunflower, Steph, Jonathan, JJ Skywalker, Lauren, Neil Sega, Music Train, Sky, Alex, Jeff, Risk, Dale, Sam, Christopher Castler, Jorge, Dante, Riley, Rob. If I missed anybody, my sincerest apologies, but we appreciate everyone coming out. I'm back on my game with the segues. You're welcome.
Yeah. And where can they go if they want to sign up for Patreon?
Oh, if you want to check out Patreon, we would love that. Cantinacast.com/Patreon. Again, everything, if you just want to say thanks to the show or you like what you do and you want to just kind of recognize that, it starts at $1. That's all it takes. If you want to get access to all that exclusive content in the past, and again, we're hoping to get on that train. Things are really crazy with all of the episodes right now, but those started just a couple of dollars. And if you want a chance to come onto the show, join us on one of our top 3 from a certain point of views, like we've done with Mandalorian season 2, all sorts of different shows that are out there. We've done with a variety of the cast. Check out those Delusions of Grandeur and the now part of the Tribe tiers. Lots of fun.
Yes. Let's see what else we got going on here. We already talked about the Jedi News Archive. We've also got the Jeditorials. Steph's got hers out.
Yeah.
What else?
And by the way, an amazing episode of Bad Batch again this past week that we're going to we're going to come back to on Sunday and talk about, what was the name of the episode?
I don't remember now.
Oh my gosh.
All I've done is Mando today, dude. And I watched the episode once, but it was pretty good. So
it's so funny because all I've been able to think about is Bad Batch. I think this is probably my favorite Bad Batch episode. It was absolutely, it was so great. It was just so much fun. Yeah. So I can't wait to come and for us to talk again on Sunday. You won't want to miss that. Bad Batch is starting to really get good. So it's cool. We're able to like switch gears. I mean, it's a lot to switch gears on, but that we're getting some really heavy hitting stuff. And what's really crazy is like Bad Batch, man, which is better right now, Bad Batch or Mandalorian? It kind of depends on just what your interests are, but Bad Batch coming on strong.
Yeah, they kind of saved the best episodes, arguably when they knew they're probably going to have more competition with Mando. But yeah, that all makes sense.
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Again, we'll be back in a few days to do not only the Bad Batch episode, we've got Patreon coming up, and lots of Star Wars talk still to come. So we'll see you guys here in just a little bit.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.